going through my pockets, throwing my stuff on the ground, kissing me on my neck and face. They pushed me up against the wall and started nibbling on my ear.
Joining us now is legal analyst Susan Hughes and Mark Brennan, a former police officer who has defended the Stop and Kiss program.
Look, it's one thing to kiss someone who you think might commit a crime, but these officers are just kissing people left and right with no probable cause.
If you've got nothing to hide, then it's not a problem. They just stop, ask where you're going, give you a gentle kiss or two, and let you go.
Mark, there have been examples, public examples, where these procedures have just gone too far. Let's take a look at a disturbing cell phone video that's been making the rounds on the internet.
Stop! Put your hands on your head. Oh, come on, man. They just kissed me 2 blocks ago. Come on, man. I didn't do anything.
Shut the f*** up and let me kiss you.
Look, the cops can either kiss people now before there's violence, or they can be kissing a bunch of dead bodies at a crime scene.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160 if you want to join us on this Monday episode of the show. Again, that number 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
And Mr. Penguin.
And coming up, I've had this story sitting in my, like, on my phone, I guess would be the way to put that, for several weeks. It kept popping up in my news feed. And Once is weird, considering it's not a topic I'm generally interested in or generally want to talk about. And then twice was when I really noticed it. And by the third time that it popped up today, I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to click this thing. And it seems to be worth talking about. And it brings up some interesting subjects. So I want to get into it at some point. Obviously, Trump recently had a rally, as one does while running for president. And during this rally, some comedian said something that people are interpreting as racist. I don't know. I have not paid much attention to the rally or to the presidential campaign, so I don't know what the dynamics are between Trump and Harris right now. Google felt fit to tell me earlier today that Donald Trump has taken the lead over Kamala Harris in the state of New Hampshire, and a lot of people are freaking out about this. And I cannot remind people fervently enough that polls mean nothing. The polls leading up to the election in 2016, when Donald Trump was campaigning against Hillary Clinton, said universally that Hillary Clinton was going to win. On that election day, Hillary Clinton, in amalgam of polls, an aggregate is what they're called. Nate Silver of 538.com, I think is the name of the website, compiled all of this data together and showed that 95% chance Hillary won and Trump lost. And that's what all the polls said prior to the actual election taking place. And the election happened, of course, and Donald Trump won the election. All of the polls leading up to that, and all of the polls that day, and all of the exit polls that people were conducting painted the same story, that it was Hillary Clinton's assured victory, that there was no way she could lose. She was going to win, and we were going to have President Hillary. Of course, that is not what happened. Donald Trump won the election. Whether you think that's rigged and you want to rant about the Electoral College and all of that, I don't particularly care. The American electoral system is stupid. It would still be stupid even if you got rid of the Electoral College, though. Even if you just did a popular vote and that nominated the president, it would still be stupid and pointless, and your vote still wouldn't matter. So, rail against that. But I'm against democracy and voting as a concept anyway, because I don't recognize much intelligence among, I don't want to say the average person, because the average person is relatively intelligent, but democracy puts a bunch of people who don't know anything about governance or business or economics or education or really about anything in the position of choosing what people are going to be in charge of those areas. And it's like if you picked a random phone book, and for those who don't know what a phone book is, because it's 2024, it was just this giant collection of people's names and phone numbers. You could just pick a name out of there, And you would have about as good of chance of them being an expert on economics as you would if you voted for a person to be president, right? You don't know anything about these people. They're not experts on these subjects, and you don't have the ability to determine who does and doesn't know what they're talking about when it comes to sociology, economics, biology, interstate wars, international wars is what I was looking for, and all of the major issues that go into, quote, running a country. It's beyond our comprehension. And we simply lack the tool set that would allow us to accurately assess which person is going to be good at doing it and which person isn't going to be good at doing it. And I don't believe any single person could be good at doing it anyway, because I think the task is fundamentally one that cannot be achieved by a human being because it's ruling over other people. Other people tend to not want to be ruled over. So at best, you're trying to herd a bunch of cats who don't want to be herded. And that's best case scenario.
I don't understand why people would support having a minority roll over the majority in the first place, because that's effectively what we end up with. And it's not even like it's a different group of people that like roll over us. It's the same. It's people with the same ideas that roll over us from one election to the next.
They don't think of it that way, though, because they believe that there is a genuine divide between Republicans and Democrats. And they firmly believe that they have a lot in common with their rulers. They believe that Donald Trump cares about them and understands their needs and their desires and their wants and their goals and their dreams and is going to, go to bat for them and do what he can to make their lives better. And on the other hand, you have people who feel exactly the same way about Kamala Harris, who believe that she understands their needs, their wants, and their desires, and she's going to go bat for them and to do all of the things that she can to make their lives better. They're fully operating in a state of delusion about the people who rule over them. I mean, obviously, Kamala Harris doesn't know anything about you. Neither Kamala Harris nor Donald Trump know anything about what it's like to be an ordinary person. And I don't know, maybe Kamala Harris, she did work in a McDonald's at one point. Maybe she did pull herself up by her bootstraps, as they say, and she put herself through college, and now she's the vice president. Maybe she did all of that great stuff. It doesn't matter. And I can give you one example to demonstrate what I'm saying. Mark Edge. Mark Edge, he's been in trouble with the law before. He's made some rough decisions, some of them he didn't really have a choice but to make at the time. He was young and caught up in terrible circumstances. But this is a guy who built his life. He made some really good decisions later on in life, and he became super, super rich. And the result of that is that he completely and totally lost all understanding of what it's like to be an ordinary person today. And there are clips with me and Ian talking to Mark about this where he just says, oh, well, yeah, someone can just, rent a room in Utila and work remotely. And they can just fly down there for the weekends or whatever. He has no perspective whatsoever on the average person living paycheck to paycheck. And, Mark Edge wasn't always rich. He is from an ordinary person. He does have an ordinary person's background, but he did lose sight of that. So I have no doubt whatsoever that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Donald Trump, any of these people who may have been poor at one point in their lives, or maybe not poor, but middle class at one point in their lives, no longer have any understanding of what it's like to actually be middle class now. Plus, what it means to be middle class now is very, very different from what it meant 30 years ago or 50 years ago. There's people talking about, I think there was a meme on some social media network recently showing how their grandparents bought a home for $12,000 back in 1956 or whatever. And they did this while the wife was a stay-at-home mom and the husband was the only one working. $12,000 for a house. Can you imagine? That's an insane amount of money for a house. You're not buying a trailer for $12,000 in 2024. You're not buying the land to put a trailer on for $12,000 in 2024.
You got to be spending at least $30,000 or $40,000, I would imagine.
Yeah, and this is well below this is completely foreign to our modern understanding of finances and the ratios between one's salary and one's house. Back in the day, and I don't know what decade this was, but I heard this at one point from someone who worked in the banking industry, was that it was common if you did not make your total house's value in 1 year in salary, then they wouldn't approve you for a loan. For example, if you wanted to buy a $200,000 house, then you had to make at least $200,000 a year. It was a little bit different then, because your house, it was probably more like you were buying a $30,000 house, so you had to make about $30,000 a year in order to justify to the bank that you were safe to buy it. But that could not possibly work in today's economy, where if you want to buy a house, it's probably going to run you between $200,000 and $300,000 to just buy an average house. And the average American, the average person, is not out there making $200,000 or $300,000 a year. They're not making anywhere close to that. So that relationship no longer exists. That ratio can no longer work. So things are different now, and it sucks. And even if Kamala Harris did work a normal job and put herself through college, break her back to do all of these things 40 years ago, it was still significantly easier then, and it doesn't give her any insight or any perspective into what it's like to live today, having to do all of these things. I know a lot of grown people, grown adults, who work 40, 45 hours a week, and at best, they can afford like a single bedroom apartment here in Keene, New Hampshire. And these people actually exist. I know a lot of them, in fact. I'm thinking of at least one, there's another who's a friend of mine who works full 40 hours a week, doesn't get any overtime, but doesn't really want overtime. And he's relegated to renting a bedroom from someone. And he actually was going through a bit of I don't want to say crisis, but he was having some issues recently that I was talking with him about, while he was feeling some of these darker bits of despair about how it was impossible for him. Without some drastic change to his life, it was impossible for him to ever be alone, like as in single, and actually having his own place again, his own house that he could go to, his own space, versus just renting a bedroom in someone else's house. And part of this is because the rent in Keene, New Hampshire is obscenely expensive.
Housing prices have gone up extremely over the last 4 or 5 years. I know before COVID, at least, the cost of housing in Keene was not insane, and people working basically, I don't want to say minimum wage, but the equivalent of minimum wage today.
Well, no one in Keene makes minimum wage, thankfully. Like even the McDonald's here starts people at $15 an hour, and it's been doing that for a long time.
Or I guess the starting wage maybe is a better way to phrase it. Usually in this area, and people were making the starting wage, and they were able to afford houses. Maybe not standalone houses, but certainly like a condo or a trailer or something of that nature. So things have changed a lot, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years.
The average rent in Keene, New Hampshire is apparently between $1,500 and $1,800.
Wow.
And I don't have the ability to do the math in my head to figure out how much one of these people is making on $15 an hour. But yes, they could always... There's always the argument they could cut out their Starbucks, they could find a new cell phone plan, they could get the cheapest internet plan they can turn off their lights when they're not in the bathroom or whatever. There's always things that a person can do to lower their expenses. And there's no doubt that a lot of this is that people are outspending against their income. Another reality, however, is that food is insanely expensive, and it's only getting more expensive. I go grocery shopping every single week, and I'm spending about $120 in groceries in a week. But I only buy like organic, and I buy mostly vegetables and fruits and stuff. And it's the prepackaged crap that is killing people. It's the 12-pack of Diet Cokes, the 4 bags of Doritos, the microwave meals, the big $12 bag of frozen chicken nuggets that you're going to microwave or pop in your stove. Those are the expensive things that are making your grocery bill unbelievably expensive. You could buy some raw chicken breasts, for a pound of them, for like $6, and maybe not make your own nuggets, but fry yourself up your own chicken, or cook it however you want, and that's going to cost half the price of the chicken nuggets. But people aren't going to do that. It's also going to be much healthier for you, because it's not going to be this overly processed garbage that you're getting when you buy these, this pound bag of frozen nuggets from the store that you just microwave as you want. It's a lot more convenient, yes, but you're paying for that cost. And the result is that when you buy your Doritos and your frozen chicken nuggets, your 12-pack of Diet Pepsi, and all of the other prepackaged crap that you're buying, your grocery bill is going to be 3 or 4 times higher than mine is. Because I would rather just buy a pound of raw chicken and cook it myself. Except I don't actually eat meat, but when I do buy it for my boyfriend because he eats meat. But anyway, none of that's really matter. I could buy the same types of food, I guess is what I'm saying. If they're buying chicken nuggets, I could buy raw chicken, and my grocery bill is going to be 1/4 to 1/3 of what theirs is.
Yeah, I can say what I've noticed, in my lifetime, and I'm 40, is that people back in the day, I think, were more, they wouldn't be as wasteful with their spending as people are today. But at the same time, people were able to afford things like houses, and the cost of housing is gone sky high. So like, just as an example, something that was common back in the day was people bringing, lunch to work. They make their lunch at home and they bring it to work, or they make lunch for their kids and the kids would bring it to work. They wouldn't go and buy it necessarily, whatever the fast food place is around the corner at work.
But you're a pariah if you do that now. I've seen it. I actually cook and take myself meals about maybe not once a week, but actually it's more like 2 or 3 times a week. And no one else at my place of work does this.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a sign of the times, but it's a change in society, just a mental change in that, like, people today, it's kind of like they expect it to be given to them almost, and there's certainly issues when it comes to like economics being messed up, but at the same time, it's also like people just they don't really pay attention to what it is they're spending money on.
I got weird looks the first time that I took a smoothie that I had made into my workplace for me to have. Now, granted, it was because I had made way too much smoothie, so I just took it in the entire blender. But that wasn't even the weird. I didn't even get weird looks because of that. I got weird looks from people as I poured it out of the blender and into a cup so that I could drink it. People like, "What are you doing?" "I'm drinking a smoothie." "Oh," and they would still give me kind of a weird look because it's so foreign to them to not just go to YOLO or some other place around town and buy a smoothie for $8.
Yeah,
because you can do that as well. But the big half gallon of smoothie that I had, which is a lot of smoothie, by the way, the grand total of all of the ingredients cost less than maybe $2. And it was an enormous amount.
Yeah, eating out all the time is super expensive. It's just like smoking or, any number of other, activities that people may have done, probably more in the past, I suppose, more especially the smoking. But, there's a lot of things that people waste money on. That's just like, if you really want to increase your ability to afford a place today, you gotta go start thinking back to what your parents or your grandparents did as far as saving money, because it's
even then it won't be enough though, because their grandparents were able to buy a house for $12,000.
Yeah,
and you can't do that today.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, the wages have gone up by comparison, but it is a good question as to whether the wages haven't gone up relative to the cost of living is the issue.
They certainly haven't.
At least not in the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, and then the COVID inflation happened, and a lot of this happened under Donald Trump, and then the rest of it continued under Joe Biden. And we said at the time that all of this money, these stimulus packages that the government was engaging in, was going to cause an unreal increase in the prices of goods.
Oh yeah.
And of course, it
definitely,
did.
100%.
But you can go to Free Talk Live episodes from late 2020 into mid 2021, where we talked about this exact subject. And we talked about the numbers and the $600 check that every American got, and then the $1,200, and then the $2,000.
We're still paying for it, and people don't even realize like where the costs are coming from. If you go into Walmart, the cost of goods are about 13% on average higher than what they should be, and it's a result of tariffs. And what is a tariff? A tariff is just a tax on goods that come from overseas as opposed to being manufactured, locally. But the reality is we don't manufacture anything in the United States, so you're basically taxed.
And the rest of it is just that the dollar is worth so much less now because so much of it was printed in 2022 now.
Right. So money printing is one means of inflation. It was one cause of inflation, and so is taxes, hidden taxes.
Well, inflation is an increase in the money supply. So only printing money causes that inflation.
Right.
The price increase is a result of inflation, and other things are increasing the prices as well.
Right. Like
it's always important to make that clarification because the media, in particular, the mainstream media and the White House and the government, they like to paint inflation as something that just sort of happens, something that we don't control, right? Inflation is the prices going up, and we don't know how to do anything about that. It's just a result of all of these factors. No. Inflation is an increase in the money supply. That's all it is.
Yeah,
and when you increase the money supply, that has a side effect of increasing the prices of goods.
And that's kind of a misleading way to put it, because the price of goods aren't necessarily changing so much as the value of the dollar has declined. Therefore, you need more dollars.
But the price literally does change.
It's
like
changing
the price of
it's only changing because it was priced in dollars. If it was priced in ounces of gold, it wouldn't have changed. You see what I'm saying?
Well,
so it's the value declining in value.
Yes, but we're in a country where when we're talking about inflation, I think it's important to, stick to the point here and not muddy this up with, well, yes, if they were buying gold, then if they were using gold to make their purchases, then gold wouldn't have been affected by an increase in the money supply of the USD. However, the prices did go up. The Dollar Tree no longer sells things for $1. But that is like your literal proof that prices have gone up, Chris.
Confusing things, because it wasn't the store that decided to increase the price. It was the government's reduction of the value.
The store literally decided to increase the price as a result of the money supply being increased. The store did not increase the money supply.
Yeah, okay.
The store increased their prices. To suggest that anyone but Dollar Tree determines what their prices are is simply not true.
Oof.
Dollar Tree and Dollar Tree alone decides what the price their goods at.
Entirely decide what the prices are either, because they have to charge more.
That's crazy. Of course they do.
No, I don't think so. Because
they can charge less. They would just go out of business. But they are 100.
So
it doesn't matter.
A market. It's influenced by the market. What Dollar Tree
that doesn't matter. The point is that Dollar Tree and Dollar Tree alone, and no one else on this planet gets to say what Dollar Tree's prices are. That doesn't mean that all prices that they set are going to be viable, but literally no one else on the planet has the authority or the power to make that determination for them.
Well, I mean, we do have laws that restrict the price on goods in some cases, but okay, yeah.
If they want to charge $50 for every product that they have, no one can stop them. And if they want to charge a penny for every product they have, no one can stop them.
They'll call that price gouging, especially in times of emergency. And
well, we're not in a time of emergency.
I know. I'm just saying that there are situations where that's not necessarily the case. Whether people call it or not, the fundamental fact is that the only people who set the price of a thing are the people who are selling that thing. And when that's not true, it's because the government has created price floors and price ceilings that cause market. There's also government subsidies.
It causes market issues. Yes, but all of those things are factors that lead into the person determining what their price is going to be. I'm not saying a person sets what the determining factors are. Like maybe this good costs that much and that good costs this much. And since I'm selling them as a package, I have to set it at this much.
We're blaming the costs or the prices that are being set on the retailers as opposed to whether the blame is really deserved. And that's
we are.
The
retailers are 1,000% the only people responsible for determining what the prices of goods are. To say anything else is libertarian apologeticism. It's making excuses.
I don't think so. I think it's the other way around. I think it's the government that's the blame for the price increases.
They don't control the money supply, but they 100% control what they set their prices at. And I don't know how you could sit there and say anything else. Do you set your prices?
I set my prices based on the cost of goods, based on
it doesn't matter what factors cause you to set the prices you set.
But the blame doesn't go to me. The blame should go to the government.
Do you set your prices?
The government is the one that's causing it.
Answer the question. It's Free Talk Live.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Haya. North Korean forces are in Russian territory, according to NATO's Secretary General. The head of the Western Defense Pact says the region in question is partially controlled by Ukraine, signalling that the troops are now or soon to be in direct combat. William Denzilo reports from Brussels, where NATO's headquartered.
In a brief address, NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte said the confirmation of North Korean forces in Kursk marked a significant escalation in the conflict. The comments came as a South Korean delegation provided an update to the North Atlantic Council. Rutte added that the partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang posed a threat to both the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. Ukraine's foreign minister says it's been warning allies about this threat for weeks, and that it urgently needs long-range missiles and a green light to hit targets deep into Russian territory.
Thousands of Georgians have gathered outside the country's parliament to support their president, who's cast doubt on an election result which saw the ruling party hold on to power. NATO, the European Union and the United States have all called for a full investigation into a litany of allegations made by monitoring missions of vote fraud. Here in the US, it's the final week of a grueling election campaign. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are facing off with an exhausting schedule of rallies. Mitch McCann's been following.
On Monday local time, Vice President Kamala Harris will visit Michigan, a key battleground state where polls show a tight race. But Harris will also have support from former President Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen, who are travelling to Pennsylvania to campaign for her. Donald Trump, meanwhile, will head to Atlanta, Georgia, after his rally on Sunday at New York's Madison Square Garden, an event that has been criticised after comments made by some of the speakers, including one instance where a comic described Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. The latest polling in the New York Times shows Harris leading Trump by a single percentage point nationally, and the swing states, which are likely to decide the final outcome, are also within the margin of error.
And new records, but not good ones. The World Meteorological Organization says concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere hit all-time highs last year. Giles Gibson has the details.
The head of the WMO says this report should set alarm bells ringing amongst decision makers, adding that the planet is clearly off track to meet the goals of the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now 151% higher than pre-industrial levels, and for methane, levels are 265% higher. The UN body says that greenhouse gas emissions and wildfires are partly to blame for these record-breaking figures.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160 if you want to weigh in. Again, the number is 603-283-6160. And with you tonight, it's Aria and Mr. Penguin. And I want to tell you about the podcast. It's still going strong, and we're actually still having a lot of fun doing it. We're a week ahead on episodes now, which was the plan when we took those 3 weeks off a few weeks ago. It was unintentional to take 3 weeks off. We meant to take 2 off, or maybe it was that we meant to take 1 off and we ended up taking 2 off. I don't remember the specifics now, and it doesn't really matter. But you can find it at freetalkcast.com. I actually spent a lot of the day working on stuff related to that and stuff related to Free Talk Live. And so that was a lot of fun. And I always enjoy doing that kind of thing. Like today, I officially put the podcast on YouTube and Listen Notes. I even put it on iTunes. Luckily, I did not have to install iTunes to do that. Apple has simplified the process a little bit. I still had to make an entirely new iTunes account because I don't use iTunes. So I have no idea what my iTunes account would have been, 7 years ago when I set one up for the Call to Freedom, so I could put the Call to Freedom on iTunes. Have no idea. But anyway, you can find it on, I don't think it's live on iTunes yet. That process appears to take several days. But anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can find Free Talk Cast. In addition, you can find Free Talk Live there. And because Free Talk Live is there, you could probably find Free Talk Cast there as well. Even before I went and put it up there in its own dedicated space. It's all kind of confusing the way all of this works, but you don't need to know all of that. Just check it out at freetalkcast.com. That's where mostly Nikki and I sit down each week to talk about liberty issues, women's rights issues, rights in general, although Nikki has sort of a specialization in women's healthcare and women's reproductive rights. So those subjects get brought up quite a lot. It's a lot of fun. And each episode tends to run about 30 minutes long, so it's short, it's easy to digest, there's no filler, there's no ad breaks, there's no commercials, there's none of that. There's a little audio bed that plays at the beginning, and then we just jump straight into it. We record, we edit, we post it, and we send it. So check it out at freetalkcast.com. Again, that's freetalkcast.com. You can also find links to it at freetalklive.com, lrn.fm, on our Twitter, and all of those great places, because I went ahead and finally did all of that today. So again, check it out at freetalkcast.com. So let's go to the phones. We do have a number of callers on the line. Let's go first to Dave Ridley from here in New Hampshire. Dave, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, folks. I have an NH Exit update.
Yeah, what's up? Now, NH Exit is the, I don't want to say movement because it's a bunch of different movements and a bunch of different groups here in New Hampshire that are advocating for New Hampshire as a state to secede from the United States.
Correct. And one of the people who is he's not super involved, but he's a former state rep, Max Abramson. He's not necessarily in favor of New Hampshire leaving the Union, but in favor of the referendum to have a vote on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And we tried to drive that point home to people back during the CACR 32 era, where most state reps turned out to be against that. And this made them anti-democracy, literally anti-democracy, because we just wanted the people of New Hampshire to vote on whether or not they wanted to do something. And all of these state reps, minus I think it was 12 of them, said, no, we can't let the people vote on this. We can't let democracy happen.
And then there was another one. What was it? CRC 20, was it? The next year, which was double those numbers in terms of reps supporting it. So,
oh really?
Yeah.
There was another. I didn't see. I think I was in prison at that time. So there was another secession bill that got 20-ish.
Yeah, Dave.
People supporting
do you want to refresh our memory on that?
Correct. The number went from, I guess, 13 to 24, if I'm not mistaken.
That's an impressive.
Almost doubled.
I can't remember which.
That's an impressive improvement.
I guess it went up by 85%, the number of people who voted in favor of it. Was a little bit convoluted. They were voting in favor of kind of keeping the legislation alive, basically. And if the legislation had gone through, then it would have let the people vote on the issue, and that would have decided the issue.
Okay. So it was sort of an attempt to repeat CACR 32, which was a constitutional amendment question that in theory would have been on the ballot that would have said something to the effect of, should New Hampshire peaceably declare independence from the United States, or something to that effect. I don't recall the exact wording now, but it would have just allowed the people of New Hampshire to say whether or not they wanted to secede from the United States.
Yes, and one of the people who voted in favor of it, either in 2022 or 24, I can't remember which, maybe both, he voted in favor of keeping the legislation alive, was Max Abramson of Seabrook. And I interviewed him yesterday on my podcast on RidleyReport.com. And he is making the claim that you should be able to bypass, you don't necessarily have to do what we did and try to do a constitutional amendment that would have to go through lots of different branches of government before it gets to the people. Right. He believes you could just make a piece of legislation that creates a referendum or puts a thing on the ballot, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I seem to recall when you first called the show several years ago, and I think I was on with Angie at the time, and maybe one other person. I don't remember who. I don't think Ian was actually on. He was just listening upstairs. But when we first talked about it, there were like 3 different approaches we could go with. And the 3 of us, me, you, and Ian, decided that the most effective was to go with the constitutional amendment approach.
And that proved itself. Yeah, that proved itself in 2022. It got a lot of attention. It got 12 votes, and then it doubled itself the next time it came up. But the problem is that if we got through the state house, then we'd have to get through the Senate, and I think we'd have to have supermajority votes in both, and then we'd have to have a supermajority from the people. So Max is saying legislation, just to have the vote, just to have it on the ballot, is really all. It's probably all we need, and it's possible. So that's something I agree with him on, and I would urge people to just drop by RidleyReport.com and listen to the details of what he advocated, because I don't want to put too many words in his mouth. I just know that he favors legislation instead of a constitutional amendment.
Well, that makes sense. A constitutional amendment is very difficult to get passed, both nationally and in the state of New Hampshire. That's sort of by design.
Yeah, curious. What was what's the thing that caused us to join the union in the first place? Was that a constitutional amendment, or was that just a law that was passed in New Hampshire? Do we know?
I don't know.
I'm curious as to what that was.
I know that one is required to have a constitution in order to join the United States.
Yes, but it's not what the United States requires. It's what New Hampshire required to join the union in the first place that matters. And if we only passed it through legislation and not through a constitutional amendment, then we should be able to undo it the same way.
Well, I'm of the opinion that it should be a lot easier to undo a relationship than it is to start a new relationship. Like if I wanted to break up with my boyfriend, I don't need an explanation. I don't need justification. I don't need a legal process. I just have to end the relationship. And I would argue that the same should generally be true in regard to marriages as well. That I think it was a mistake to ever involve the government in marriage and what should be a private religious ceremony. But all of that aside, if you want to end your marriage, all you have to do is walk away, is end the marriage, to say, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't for me. It's not meeting my needs, and I have no desire to continue it.
I don't think any of the exit proponents would say that we need permission to leave the union, because we needed permission to enter the union because there was the United States and then New Hampshire, but to leave it, I don't think anybody would say that.
I would certainly hope not, but a lot of people out there would say that. They're obviously not on our side, and I want to reach those people by pointing out to them again that you don't need your husband's permission to leave him and to divorce him. And if you're and especially if your husband or your spouse is abusive, you don't need that abusive person's permission in order to leave them, and you're frankly crazy if you think that this abusive person is going to ever give you permission to leave them. And that's sort of the situation that we're in with the United States.
So 2 points. First of all, the thing I keep forgetting to mention when I talk about NH exit is the Survey USA poll in 2022, which is a scientific poll conducted from outside New Hampshire, showed 42% support among New Hampshireites for an independence referendum. So that's one of the closest things we've ever had to an actual vote on independence.
42%, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people keep forgetting. I keep forgetting to mention it. Other people forget to mention it.
But again, that doesn't necessarily mean those people are in favor of independence. As you said, they're in favor of the referendum. But when I lived in Mississippi, a friend of mine asked me if I would work with him to get a ballot question on about allowing prayers in schools. And I agreed to help them with it. Not because I wanted prayers to be legally mandated in schools, but I felt that if the people of the county that I was living in wanted to make that decision and they wanted to vote yes on that, then it was kind of arrogant of me to deny them the right to make that determination. And I think it would be the same sort of thing here, where these people are like, look, if people want to make their own minds, if they want to make their own determination, whether I agree with it or not, then I support their right to do so. And I think that's a beautiful sentiment.
And the other key point is that, we don't have to, if there's some kind of legal problem with any kind of binding referendum on independence, if people think there's a legal problem or a constitutional problem with that, okay, that's actually not a problem either, because you could just make a completely non-binding referendum where people express their preference. The important thing is just to have the referendum. Don't worry about whether it's binding. Just get it in front of the voters somehow. That's why I really like Max's approach.
Yep. Absolutely. And thanks for the updates tonight, Dave. I'm always happy to talk about New Hampshire NH exit, New Hampshire leaving the United States. There are a lot of hurdles to the concept of seceding from the United States. I'm not going to pretend like there aren't. But those hurdles, a lot of those bridges, as they say, cannot be crossed until it's time to actually cross them. And you can always come up with, well, what are we going to do about Social Security? What about Medicaid? What about Medicare? What about the U.S. military bases or international trade? There's always questions that are going to need to be answered. But when you're in an abusive relationship, when your husband is abusing you or your wife is abusing you, it's not important to sort out all of the details of how you're going to live for the next 5 years. All you need is a roof over your bed that night.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is...
A roof over your head that night, sorry.
You're 100% like spot on with this, but at the same time, I think people don't understand that a lot of these questions, like, we have answers to them. Like Social Security, whether you live in the United States or outside the United States, the fact that you paid into it is what determines whether or not you get it pays out. So you don't even have to be a U.S. citizen and in the United States to receive Social Security as long as you worked in the United States at some point.
Fascinating.
So like, there's a lot of questions that are like, people are like, oh, they're freaking out. Well, I if we leave the union, I'll lose my Social Security and therefore are against it. It's like, no, why would you even think that? That's not how that works.
It comes back to that same issue where people don't want answers to these questions. They're not interested in hearing you explain that they'll still be eligible for their Social Security. They're expressing fear, and they're using this fear as a way of just closing down the idea of New Hampshire independence altogether. The prospect, the uncertainty of what could happen terrifies them, and it paralyzes them into inaction. And there's nothing that you could say. There's no amount of, it's going to be okay. Look, I promise you, we can solve all of these problems that's ever going to reach them, because they find so much comfort in the system as it currently is.
Yep. Doesn't matter how much better off we'll be without being part of the United States.
Yep.
They're still gonna worry.
And they will say, well, we might have warlords take over. What if Al Qaeda attacks New Hampshire? What will happen then? Like, okay, do you really not think that the United States would react if Al Qaeda attacked New Hampshire? But even if they didn't, why would Al Qaeda attack New Hampshire? They've never attacked us yet, and to my knowledge, at least. And New Hampshire wouldn't be doing anything to make Al Qaeda angry in the first place.
It's somewhat almost hypocritical, I think, in that people think that their local governments are like better than Washington D.C., but yet at the same time, they don't want to leave Washington D.C. Right? It's like, okay, if you trust your local reps more than you trust the Washington D.C. reps, shouldn't you want to leave?
I trust the New Hampshire state reps a lot more than I trust DC reps. That's true. Even the ones I don't know, even the ones that aren't Liberty reps, even the Democratic state reps in New Hampshire, I trust more than your state reps, than your national representatives. I trust the most diehard Democratic New Hampshire state representative more than I trust Senator Rand Paul. And I can't even feel ashamed of that, because the New Hampshire system gives us 450 state reps, and it makes them very local. They're very contained. I can find this state rep and go and have a conversation with them if I want to. They're doing this because they care about it. Whatever their motives are for caring about it isn't my business. Whether they're Democrats or Republicans or Libertarians, they care about the system and they want to change it for the better. And because of that, they're going to be on average, a little more trustworthy. Even Brody Duché, that horrible specimen of a person that we had to deal with
He is
during
terrible.
CACR.
Or was. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard he stepped down or something.
He's gone. Nah, he wasn't reelected. So this guy was basically leading the opposition to New Hampshire independence.
Yeah, he was the worst.
He's gone now because, well, apparently, the people in New Hampshire want independence, and they voted him out.
They at least didn't want Brody Duché. So thank goodness he's gone. Anyway, I would still trust him more than any politician who's ever ran and won an office in Washington, D.C. Because Ron Paul is an exception, but I have some understanding of what it takes to win a national office. And it's a lot of corruption. It's a lot of back deals. You got to grease the right palms and make the right friends and get the right Republicans friendly with you, get the right Democrats friendly with you. And you got to know all the right people and make all the correct promises to the right donors. And it's a millions upon millions of dollars process. And you can't do that in most cases while remaining true and honest to yourself. I think Ron Paul is probably the exception. There are some others who have been good. Thomas Massie is usually pretty good. Justin Amash, also usually pretty good. But only one of them, Ron Paul, would be one that I would genuinely trust to make good decisions consistently. And that's just because, again, the process itself requires corruption in order for one to actually win those races and earn those seats in the first place. And that's especially true in regard to Senate seats, considering there's only, I think, 100 of them. Are there 100? I mean, there's 50 states, and there's 2 senators per state.
Yeah.
I'm thinking national. No, I'm talking nationally.
Okay.
Like I think there's 24 senators in the state of New Hampshire at the state level.
At the state level, but there's 2 at the federal level.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have the same problem in the New Hampshire Senate, where in order to win, we've had a lot of Liberty reps win in the representatives, in the House of Representatives, but I don't think we've had any ever win the Senate race.
One, I believe. One? Yeah, I think we have one.
I know someone, I think it was the guy who invented a Raven coin, if I remember correctly. He was running and he seemed to have a pretty good shot, but I didn't think he won. But
yeah, we had one rep win, and
one senator.
Yeah, sorry, one senator, and this is for New Hampshire for the 24 seats. Yeah.
Okay, that's an impressive improvement. Because even in the small state of New Hampshire, with this population of like 2.5 million or whatever, you have to, again, know all of the right people, make all of the right promises to all of the right big donors, and have all the right friends and all the right political allies in order to even have a chance of running for one of these seats, much less actually winning it. So it's not easy to do. And at the national level, that issue is compounded to even greater heights. And the result is that our New Hampshire state reps generally represent, I think, about 10 to 20,000 people throughout the entire...
I think it's like 3,000 or something like that. It's really, really tiny.
So the result is that they are much more, not accountable, but they're much more local in that they're only representing 3,000 people instead of 3 million people. And that just it's better, in my opinion. Better to have more...
Yeah.
State rep. Better to have everyone be their own representative, in my opinion. But
New Hampshire has the largest state house. We have the most number of House reps in the country. So
it does.
It's 400. 24 senators. And
the result is that I can say that I'm friends with. I don't think they're still state representatives. I'm not entirely sure because I spent a year in prison and I kind of lost touch with the political aspect of things, but at one point I could say that I was friends with several state reps, and that sounds really impressive if you're not from New Hampshire.
Yeah, no, like we actually can put forward legislation, and we have on a number of occasions. Now, at least one of them, we actually got something passed, and that was just people. That was us basically pushing it forward. Now, I'm not just talking about like.
Well, CACR 32 was me, Dave Ridley, and Ian.
Sure, exactly. But that's not even what I'm thinking of.
Of course, that did not get passed.
Well, so that didn't pass, but the one I am thinking of was the crypto one a number of years ago, where it was something like we removed the authority of the banking department to regulate crypto in New Hampshire. So.
And to give credit where it's due, none of us, me, Ian, or Dave Ridley are state reps. Dave Ridley put in the work to contact a number of state reps, and he found 2 who were willing to do it. Matt Santanastasso, with whom I've actually gone skydiving. He's one of the state reps I would consider one of my friends. Absolutely, he's one of my friends. And the other, oh God, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I'm so ashamed of myself for forgetting this guy's name. But there was another state rep, and they were the ones who actually put forward the legislation, and Matt Santanastasso co-sponsored it. But there was a lot of emailing back and forth between myself, Dave Ridley, Ian, and these 2 state reps while we worked out the wording and how we were going to pay for it, because David calculated that the cost of something like this was going to run, I think it was $2,000. So Ian and I each put forth $1,000, and we pulled that together, and we decided to give that back to the taxpayer in New Hampshire. And we actually did this, but we gave it to them in a valuable way. We gave them actual gold in the form of goldbacks. So instead of giving them a $5 bill, or I guess it would have been a $20 bill or whatever, we there at the state house, I literally handed people goldbacks. Here's your refund for us going through this, tedious process that costs the taxpayer money. We don't want to be parasites, so we're paying for this expenditure, and here's your portion back. It was a lot of fun. And sadly, that didn't make any headlines. That didn't get anyone's attention as far as I can tell. A lot of people, especially like the suited people, oh no, this is serious business kind of state reps, they actually turned it down. And I watched Mark Dice's videos a number of times on YouTube before I realized what a piece of dirtbag he really was. And I watched him go through the streets of some city and offer people, you can have an ounce of silver, or you can have a Hershey's bar. Which would you rather have?
Yep.
And almost universally, the people would take the Hershey's bar. And I remember watching this and thinking, who would turn down an ounce of silver? That's crazy. But then I was literally trying to give people actual literal gold. And they were saying, no, thank you. I don't want that.
Yep.
Like, what's wrong with you, man? It's gold.
So I would respond with, don't give it to me, give it to somebody else, because somebody else hasn't seen gold, they haven't touched gold, they don't have any gold. And so from my perspective, that's what I would want. But I completely understand somebody. I also can understand somebody turning it down for not only that reason, but for the reason of, well, I can eat the Hershey bar. I don't know what to do with the ounce of silver, right? Like, unless you can spend it.
You could take it to a pawn shop and they'd probably give you 10 Hershey's chocolate bars.
I'm sure they would, but that requires me to find some place on a map, and that takes another 10 minutes out of my day. That's not worth the ounce of gold. I mean,
I will also add that a few people also almost turned down the gold back because they thought it was just a 1 unit, a 1 note.
Like $1 worth?
Yeah. Which would have been 1,000th of an ounce of gold, but when they looked again, they saw that it was a 5, and they're like, oh yeah, actually, I will take that, thank you. But it was a lot of fun, and it achieved something. It got some ideas on the map. 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It is Free Talk Live.
Still coming up short at the supermarket? I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. You could be suffering shrinkflation. Same price, less stuff. It's not your imagination. That cereal box is skinnier. That bag of Doritos is now a half-ounce smaller, averaging 5 fewer chips per, according to Forbes, which reports that a bottle of Aleve has gone from 100 caplets to 90. Cottonelle Mega Roll toilet paper shrank from 340 sheets to 312 sheets. Is nothing sacred? Compare unit price, not item price. Those name products that are shorting you have to cover the cost of advertising that made you brand loyal, unlike store brands, which in many cases are made by the same supplier. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Haya. North Korean forces are in Russian territory, according to NATO's Secretary General. The head of the Western Defense Pact says the region in question is partially controlled by Ukraine, signalling that the troops are now or soon to be in direct combat. William Denzilo reports from Brussels, where NATO's headquartered.
In a brief address, NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte said the confirmation of North Korean forces in Kursk marked a significant escalation in the conflict. The comments came as a South Korean delegation provided an update to the North Atlantic Council. Rutte added that the partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang posed a threat to both the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. Ukraine's foreign minister says it's been warning allies about this threat for weeks, and that it urgently needs long-range missiles and a green light to hit targets deep into Russian territory.
Thousands of Georgians have gathered outside the country's parliament to support their president, who's cast doubt on an election result which saw the ruling party hold on to power. NATO, the European Union and the United States have all called for a full investigation into a litany of allegations made by monitoring missions of vote fraud. Here in the US, it's the final week of a grueling election campaign. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are facing off with an exhausting schedule of rallies. Mitch McCann's been following.
On Monday local time, Vice President Kamala Harris will visit Michigan, a key battleground state where polls show a tight race. But Harris will also have support from former President Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen, who are travelling to Pennsylvania to campaign for her. Donald Trump, meanwhile, will head to Atlanta, Georgia, after his rally on Sunday at New York's Madison Square Garden, an event that has been criticised after comments made by some of the speakers, including one instance where a comic described Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. The latest polling in the New York Times shows Harris leading Trump by a single percentage point nationally, and the swing states, which are likely to decide the final outcome, are also within the margin of error.
And new records, but not good ones. The World Meteorological Organization says concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere hit all-time highs last year. Giles Gibson has the details.
The head of the WMO says this report should set alarm bells ringing amongst decision makers, adding that the planet is clearly off track to meet the goals of the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now 151% higher than pre-industrial levels, and for methane, levels are 265% higher. The UN body says that greenhouse gas emissions and wildfires are partly to blame for these record-breaking figures.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today in more detail at a decision by India and China to bury the hatchet over a border dispute that has lasted since the 1960s. They have agreed to deconfliction along the so-called line of control that separates the two countries in the mountains of the Himalayas. They have engaged in a military standoff in that icy, inhospitable terrain for decades. But analyst Bob McMahon of America's Council on Foreign Relations says the agreement could be the beginning of the standoff's end.
It's the first time in more than 5 years that they had formal talks. They've had informal talks, but these were formal talks they had on the sidelines of the BRICS summit, and details are still to come, and those are going to be really important to watch. But this line of actual control, which is more than 2,100 miles, they are now saying they will jointly patrol contested areas. These were what you would call confidence-building measures, because both sides have been building things like roads, seen as the run-up to seizing more territory or bringing in more military materiel and so forth to be able to beef up their presence and create facts on the ground for what they claim to be their place. It's still a long road ahead for them to get into any sort of process where they can actually mark out an agreed-upon border. but it's still in all really important.
The deal was announced at the BRICS summit last week in the Russian city of Kazan, and it was partly brokered by Russian President Vladimir Putin after several rounds of talks over many weeks. A reminder of our top stories. North Korean forces are in Russian territory, according to NATO's Secretary General. Tens of thousands of Georgians gathered outside the country's parliament to support their president, who's cast doubt on an election result which saw the ruling party hold on to power. And here in the US, it's the final week of a grueling election campaign. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are facing off with an exhausting schedule of rallies. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington.
Sources close to area man Michael Huesmer confirmed this week the unmotivated 29-year-old loser continues to waste his time living a contented life in his hometown near his closest friends and family members and has no intention of leaving. Former classmates told reporters the directionless bum has no ambition to leave his close-knit community for an expensive and stressful life in a big city and is apparently satisfied with remaining a pitiful nobody for the remainder of his unassuming existence.
While most of us with dreams got ourselves dingy apartments and soul-crushing jobs in the city years ago, Michael just stayed behind, happy to live his humdrum existence of regular contact with his parents in a town of people who express genuine appreciation for his presence. Honestly, it's pathetic.
In the time it took you to watch this video, you could have read one of Shakespeare's sonnets, listened to an etude by Chopin, or taken in one of the masterworks from the golden age of Dutch painting. The Onion applauds your excellent taste. For more, keep checking theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You can take control of the airwaves, talk about whatever is important to you. That's 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
And Mr. Penguin.
And not your keys, not your Bitcoin. That's an important lesson for people to know in regards to cryptocurrency, and hopefully one that you don't have to learn the hard way. Get your cryptocurrency out of these places like Coinbase and Kraken, Binance, all of these other... I always mix these up. Is it a custodial wallet where the other people control your keys, or is that a non-custodial wallet? Because I could understand it from either perspective.
It's a custodial wallet if other people control your keys.
So you want to control your keys, basically, is the important takeaway. And when you're keeping your cryptocurrency on Binance or Kraken, you're not doing that. There's a lot of wallets out there, and you should do your research and find out one that's actually going to meet your needs. I would suggest that you start at edge.app in doing your wallet research needs, because it's got a place where you can click at the top to learn more about how wallets work, what is Bitcoin, what is cryptocurrency, how do these things function, what is the value in keeping your cryptocurrency in a wallet that you actually control. A lot of really helpful resources that you can find there at edge.app. That's edge.app. And they do, of course, have a wallet that you can download directly there, or you can get it from the Google Play or Apple stores. It's an awesome wallet. It has a unique login feature that allows you to actually just sign in to your account with a username and password. And despite this, you will actually retain control over your private keys, even using a login system. Because I know what you're thinking. Though, yeah, you log into your Binance account too, so it must be exactly the same. No. One of the unique things about Edge is that they've managed to take that login system and merge it with the ability of you to actually control your own keys. And if you don't know what I'm talking about at all, again, edge.app is a pretty good place to start. So I would recommend checking it out. Edge, of course, is a sponsor of Free Talk Live. It's important for you to know that. They are giving us an equivalent of $1,500 in Bitcoin each month. And we appreciate that. So check that out at edge.app. Again, you can learn more at edge.app. So thank you to Edge for sponsoring the show, or this hour of the show to be specific. There's a lot of wallets out there, and they're not all the same. Some of them are pretty buggy. I've read about the Jax wallet before, and Coinami, of course, is basically unusable these days. If I try to send the Bitcoin Core, that's BTC, it fails about 50% of the time. I have to close the wallet, reopen it. Sometimes it just says no connection, your funds are safe. Even if I'm connected to Wi-Fi, whether I'm not connected to Wi-Fi, it still does it. It's very frustrating, and it doesn't seem to work more often than not. Exodus Wallet is, of course, another one that I have found great success with. So I would definitely recommend that one as well. But Edge and Exodus, I'd say, are my main go-to wallets. And Edge more than any of the others because it's just so convenient to use. It's so convenient. Learn more about it at edge.app. That's edge.app. I want to talk about this Trump thing before we get into any more of the weeds with other stuff, because apparently, actually, I don't even want to talk about the Trump thing, honestly. Someone made a joke and the people freaked out. I guess it's worth getting to. So someone named Tony Hinchcliffe made some jokes recently at a Trump rally that Hulk Hogan and some other people spoke at. I wanted to like Hulk Hogan, but I simply can't at this point. He's like Kid Rock. He's an alcoholic Budweiser drinking dude, bro. And I can't respect him. This guy who's supposed to be, I don't want to say cool because like we're way past that era, but he's supposed to be a down to earth, ordinary human being. Plus, if you look into his history, he's kind of a jerk. He built his entire wrestling career out of exploiting other wrestlers and keeping them from rising to the top, so that they would build them up as being these huge unstoppable forces they were the next shining star in the wrestling career. And then Hulk Hogan would appear and he would take them down, and then they would just fade into obscurity again. And this happened over and over and over, where they routinely just destroyed people's wrestling careers in order to make Hulk Hogan be like this unstoppable juggernaut that was the final test of anyone trying to be successful.
Isn't that entertainment? Isn't that kind of
it would be if he wasn't one of the main people behind the driving. He was one of the main driving forces behind building these plot arcs. Mm-hmm. And he knew that he was going to be destroying these people's long-term career prospects by using them in this way. And like, that's kind of messed up. Like if imagine a rock band doing the same sort of thing where you're bringing in these awesome opening acts so that you can eclipse them and make them look ridiculous in the end. And after you do this, they fade into obscurity and they can never rebuild their careers as a result of that. That's what Hulk Hogan did. He destroyed people's careers in order to make himself more valuable, in order to make himself wealthier and more popular and more successful. It's just kind of messed up. And I'm giving a bad overview of all of it because I'm just going off of what I remember having read a few weeks ago when Hulk Hogan first came across my attention. But that was the gist of it. And the way the details of it are a bit more messed up because like he did control these plot arcs because he was a major figure in the WCW and the WWE at the time. And the result is that he could have done other things, but he didn't. So instead, he just like allowed these people to build themselves up as being great. And then he was the rock wall that stopped them. And he came out looking great and they came out looking like crap.
To be it's for entertainment. So it wasn't real in the first place. So like, I don't know, like to me,
it's not real, but these people had real careers and they were trying to be successful.
I mean, they were entertainers, were they not?
Yes, they are entertainers, but their actor was one of the script writers at the same time, and he was using them to make himself look better and throwing them under the bus in the process.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems to me not that different from like what Hollywood would do in a film. Like you would also have people who are lower and higher in terms of the...
Well, certainly, but if you have an actor who, again, is repeatedly using other actors, making them look good until he can make them look bad so that he makes himself look better, and then they fade into obscurity and they can't get any more roles. Yes, but it was a plot line that he used over and over and over, and there are dozens of wrestlers whose careers died because of this plot arc.
I am not a person who's into wrestling, and I don't really know anything about the industry, so I just know what I've heard a little bit over the years. So.
Well, it's certainly entertainment, right? Yeah. I'm not denying that, but the idea that you can write a plot that is going to destroy someone's career and it's fine because it's just entertainment is simply
it seems like
crazy.
I don't know. It seems like say you're ruining their career.
He did that repeatedly
when they're
to
doing
dozens
it,
of people.
When it's intentional and everybody knows that's the whole point. Like, I don't know.
The whole point was not to ruin anyone's career. That was the point for Hulk Hogan. But no one becomes a wrestler because they want to ruin their career.
I mean, but it's all fake to begin with in the first place. So, like,
it's
I don't
fake,
know.
but the results and the views are real, right? It's entertainment, yes, and it's
But you
scripted,
know
yes.
going in that you're gonna lose. So I don't understand how
you
that's.
don't know that that's going to destroy your career. And I don't know what part of this you're not understanding. Hulk Hogan wrote plot lines that he knew would destroy other wrestlers' careers.
And those wrestlers went in knowing this, right? Like, it's not like they went in under the illusion that it wasn't
they were
entertainment.
new. They were new people. They were new to the industry, trying to make careers out of this. And Hulk Hogan knew that, and he exploited that. He said, "We're going to build you up great," and then he would elbow them back into the bottom to make himself look better. So he would take these fresh young stars who were up and rising, and he
sounds
would.
like entertainment to me, like just a regular entertainment that you would
That is
see in the
horrifically immoral. I don't know why you're not
there's a
understanding
lot
that.
of-
Imagine hiring a new person so that you can steal all of the code that they write. Like, hey, you're a great up and comer. You're doing great. Oh, you're writing all this wonderful
Well,
code for
presumably
me. Now
they're
I'm going to
being-
steal it. Now you're fired.
They're being paid for that, though. Like, it's not like, I mean, and I understand where you're coming from, kind of in that, like the whole entertainment.
I do not
world
understand
is-
your perspective on things, dude.
The whole entertainment
borderline
world,
a sociopath right now.
The whole entertainment world is full of like that, basically. Like,
and none of that makes it okay.
Well,
it is not okay to intentionally build up someone so that you can smash them into the dirt.
But people aren't
That's
getting,
not okay.
I don't know. I think people are going into that knowing it. Like it's not like they're going into
No
it.
one has ever started a career knowing that they were going to be built up and smashed back into the dirt and been okay with that. That's crazy, Chris.
That's entertainment, man. That's Hollywood.
No, it is not Hollywood to expect to be built up into a possibly successful actor, and then right before you cross that threshold into being successful, someone bigger and more popular comes along and says,
I don't
"No,
know.
I've decided you're not good enough.
I
Go
mean,
back to the
the
gutter."
assumption, I think, is the default assumption is like you're going to get backstabbed, and that's just I don't know.
That's being backstabbed in a story doesn't necessarily have to end your career. That's just a part of the story.
Why would it have to end your career? You could go into some other area or
because it's Hulk Hogan. That was you're not understanding the context of this clearly.
I am
like wrestling has these plot arcs, and if you are built up and you're destroyed, and then you're made to look weak as a professional
like the
wrestler.
Entertainment. That's what you're getting into. You know it before
It
you go
doesn't
into
happen
it.
with the vast majority of wrestlers. It only happened with these ones that Hulk Hogan decided to use as a building block to his own success and fame.
Okay.
And he would just smash them back into
I
the
don't know
dirt
enough
afterward.
about it.
And you're like, that's fine. It's just entertainment.
It's always been sold to me by the people who are into wrestling as it's entertainment. It's faked. It's not real. So if it's not real, the people are going in knowing it. It's scripted. It's literally scripted. They know they're going into it and they're going to lose because it's scripted.
They don't know they're going to lose.
They do.
Right.
It's literally scripted.
Someone has to win every wrestling match. How do they
So
know they're going to be
in
the ones
knowing they're
picked to
gonna
lose? How can you say that, Chris? You're insane. Listen to yourself.
I'm not
someone
saying
has to
I'm
win.
just telling you what I understand it to be in the first place.
You literally just said someone has to win every wrestling match so they go in knowing
I'm
they're
saying
going to lose.
it's
Someone is
scripted.
going to win. How do they not know that they could be the one picked to win? That's crazy.
Because it's entertainment. It's
Someone is
not
going to win.
real.
Someone is going to win.
It's not like other sports. There's not actual athletic.
Listen, someone is going to win. Yes or no?
Sure.
So
But
why
it's
wouldn't they
scripted.
enter the
It's
career
not-
thinking there was a possibility that they could be the one picked to win?
Because it's
Someone has to
scripted.
win.
It's entertainment. It's more like Hollywood than it is like some other sports. Baseball, like there's some sort of athletic aspect of it, right?
That's not
so
the
they
point.
might be able to win.
None of that is the
and move
point.
up.
Someone is going to win. One of these two people is going to win.
Yeah.
And someone is going to write a script determining which one of those two people is going to win.
Sure.
Right? Okay. Why wouldn't a person think that there was a chance they could be the one that script writer picks to
Because
win?
that's not how the industry
One of them
works.
is going to win. We
just like a
established
movie.
that.
It's just
You're
like a movie.
absolutely insane.
If you're going to go and apply for, interview for a movie, and you're not applying for the lead role, and you're applying for, some sort of role where the character is going to die, I mean, you can't then complain that, well, I thought I could be, the lead role. Like,
We're talking two wrestlers, okay?
Yeah.
I don't know why you're assuming one of them is certain to win and the other is certain to lose.
Because it's scripted. There's literally
Who's
a script.
writing the script? Why are you writing the script that person A is going to win and person B is going to lose? That's my question. Why are you assuming that?
I'm assuming because I guess it's
Could
how
you not
I
write the script a different way where the other person wins?
But that's
okay.
not, it's entertainment. You're going into it for entertainment. You're not doing it. You're like an actor.
This is absolutely insane, and we have to move on because you're so frustrating right now. I don't know why you don't understand this very simple concept that the other person could win too. They could write the script for the other person to win. That's really simple.
It's
Caller, you're on
entertainment
Free Talk
industry,
Live. What's
man.
on your line tonight?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I want to change the subject.
Yes, please do.
I want to pick up where I left off on Saturday before I got cut off. We were talking about pollution, and I mentioned the fact that people idling their cars, and then they start playing on their phones. And the gal I was talking to said it didn't matter much. And I looked it up and I said, well, let's say that you idle your car for 5 minutes a day. So you only play on your phone for 5 minutes a day while you're idling your car. That's 300 pounds of CO2 and 30 pounds of other pollutants per year.
I need some context here.
200
Why are people idling their cars to play on their phones?
Well, they do that instead of just
Why do you think people do
playing
that?
on their phones first and then firing up their car and leaving.
So you're saying that like
They
before leaving
start
for
their
work or
car-
something, people start their car and then they play on their phone for a few minutes and then they leave?
Yeah, they start their car, then they get on their phone.
Okay. And you take issue with
So-
this because it's polluting?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm coming up with some figures here because I was cut off, and I thought I would look up and do some research on it. And out of the 300 pounds per year and 210 million drivers in the U.S., and take 10 million of them that don't play on their phones. So let's say 200 million drivers times 300 pounds of CO2 pollutant for 5 minutes a day per year is 600 billion pounds, or 27.22 metric tons of CO2 per year for the U.S. to idle their car for 5 minutes per day.
Yeah, but they're going to pollute significantly more than that in a 5-minute drive to work or a 10-minute drive to work. So like taking issue with this seems to me to be like taking an issue with how am I looking to phrase this? It's a very minor thing compared to the pollution that is just driving a car in general.
Yeah, but you got a purpose when you're driving your car.
Not
You got a
always. I mean,
purpose.
some
You're
people
gonna-
just
you're going to go somewhere.
People idle their cars for a bunch of different reasons. It's not just because they're playing on their phones. Often people idle their cars in order to heat them up, like they got remote start. Other cases, you can't shut the vehicle off because it takes 5 minutes to like warm up to start it again or something. I think it's more like with diesel vehicles, but there's all sorts of reasons people idle their cars. I mean, if you're suggesting to ban idling, it seems like a really dumb thing to do.
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. All I'm saying is that for the 5 minutes that you would idle your car for a total day, you may make 3 or 4 stops, and for the total day you only use 5 minutes. For that 5 minutes, for every driver in the U.S., we will put out 27.22 metric tons of CO2 just for idling cars for 5 minutes per day.
Yeah, I get it.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, I get it, and I
That's a
agree with you.
huge
It's
number.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's probably a bad idea to just pointlessly idle your car. But I mean, I would suggest people not do that. But if people are going to do that, then I can't really stop them. But I would suggest, one, it's a waste of gas and it's kind of pointless. If there's no point to it, just turn your car off, right? Seems easy enough.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I wanted to make that point.
All right, well, thank you for the call tonight. Always good to, hear from someone who has done a bunch of math on this subject.
Not really sure what his point was.
I crank my car a lot, especially here in New Hampshire. It's cold.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And if it's under 32 degrees, I think the law in New Hampshire allows you to idle your car for up to 15 minutes.
I didn't think there was any idling law in New Hampshire.
I'm pretty sure there is, but I looked into it briefly and I don't remember all of the specifics now. But I think it was if it was under freezing, you're allowed to do it. But like, it's New Hampshire, man, in the winter, and like it might take an older car longer than fit. Some of them won't even get up to proper operating temperature if they're just sitting there idling and it's negative 15 degrees out there.
This whole conversation seems like you're gonna have a very different perspective if you're in the colder temperature states versus a warmer temperature state.
Definitely. And I don't know what the conversation was Saturday night because I wasn't here, I wasn't listening.
And I think that's why I missed like his point. Like he basically gave us a stat on how much pounds of pollution or something that cars like as a total output or something.
I'm inferring based on what he said, and like this is just in loose guesstimating. I didn't listen. I wasn't here. I would imagine they got into a discussion about this, and whoever's on the show was like, "Well, what's the big deal? Idling your car for 5 minutes, it can't pollute that much." And that was why he went and did all this research. And came back with those numbers.
Okay.
So I would suggest you call again Saturday if you would like to talk with those people again. But like as for me, yeah, I'm with him on that.
I mean, personally, I don't like driving to work, period. So yeah, what I really don't understand is people driving to work, like long distances, like you would think you'd want to work closer to like your job. And I guess like not everybody can do that, but I don't know.
I drive about 20 minutes to get to work right now. So I don't know. It depends on your definition of long driving. Because it used to be more like a 2-minute drive.
Yeah. So to me, I mean, 20 minutes isn't too terrible, I guess, especially if you're like kind of in the middle of a rural area. But like, I'm thinking probably more people driving from the suburbs into the cities. And then we're talking 45 minutes to like 3 hours.
And in New
to
Hampshire,
me, that seems crazy.
Just about that is crazy. In New Hampshire, just about everything is like an hour away. If you want to go to a major city, it's going to be about an hour away. So a 30-minute drive in New Hampshire is negligible.
I think it depends. Like I think most people are probably living more closer to towns, and so most of their errands during the day are probably not anywhere more than 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. But then if you're driving into work or something in another city, it would be longer.
You mentioned cigarette smoking earlier, and I wanted to get into this point then. The number one reason that I wish I hadn't started back smoking, and I do plan on attempting to quit again on January the 1st, is that it is expensive, man.
Yeah.
It's like $11 for a pack of cigarettes now.
And that's without the taxes, I bet.
No, that's with all the taxes. It's just $11 at the end of the day is what I'm paying for a pack of cigarettes.
Okay.
But that's every single day. Every single day.
Wow.
Yeah. And that gets expensive.
Yeah.
No, I can afford it, but
that's almost a meal.
It absolutely is, especially if you're buying your own groceries and stuff. But,
it's 10 meals then.
But to the to the caller's point, when I go out on break at work, especially during the winter months, and I'm gonna go out to have a cigarette, I'm gonna sit in my car and I'm gonna idle with the heat on. And yeah, that's bad for the environment, I guess. But yeah, it's bad. But I'm not going to be cold, and I'm going to have to be outside smoking a cigarette. And, I'm a creature of comfort. I would rather not be cold. Now, the contrast is if I'm at home, I'm not going to go outside and sit in my car and have a cigarette. I'm just going to go outside. So I wonder what the difference is. I've never really thought about it. At home, I don't do that. I don't go out to my car and crank it to smoke a cigarette. I just stand out there in the cold. But I don't do that at work. That's something for me to think about.
Probably because you've been standing on your feet all day.
That's true. That could be a factor.
I would think that you'd want to get off of your feet, but
could definitely be a factor. I would highly recommend, though, people not just pointlessly idle their cars. I don't know of too many people.
Do people pointlessly idle their cars though? Like I don't know. Like to me, like I go from point A to point B, turn my car off, I get out, and like I don't even wait for it to warm up. I don't have a remote start or anything like that even, and I totally understand the people who have remote start in New Hampshire.
That would have been my question for the guy Saturday night, is where he's getting this information that people do that.
I feel like people are probably doing it for a reason, and like it's kind of like being made out to be more than it is.
Yeah, like setting your GPS or whatever before a drive. I don't know. 603-283-6160. Do you idle your car
for 5 minutes though?
Yeah, before you drive?
A day?
Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join at the top of the channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it'll cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. Higher donation tiers are available if you're feeling so inspired. You'll get a special membership badge that's visible in the Odyssey chat room, and if we get enough supporters, we may enable members-only chat. This new subscription method is a great way to decentralize our direct listener support away from just Patreon and also support a libertarian-run business, Odyssey. Please visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join to subscribe to our Odyssey channel and help support spreading our message around the planet. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click Join today.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire. North Korean forces are in Russian territory, according to NATO's Secretary General. The head of the Western Defense Pact says the region in question is partially controlled by Ukraine, signalling that the troops are now or soon to be in direct combat. William Denzilo reports from Brussels, where NATO's headquartered.
In a brief address, NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte said the confirmation of North Korean forces in Kursk marked a significant escalation in the conflict. Comments came as a South Korean delegation provided an update to the North Atlantic Council. Rutte added that the partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang posed a threat to both the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. Ukraine's foreign minister says it's been warning allies about this threat for weeks, and that it urgently needs long-range missiles and a green light to hit targets deep into Russian territory.
Thousands of Georgians have gathered outside the country's parliament to support their president, who's cast doubt on an election result which saw the ruling party hold on to power. NATO, the European Union and the United States have all called for a full investigation into a litany of allegations made by monitoring missions of vote fraud. Here in the US, it's the final week of a grueling election campaign. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are facing off with an exhausting schedule of rallies. Mitch McCann's been following.
On Monday local time, Vice President Kamala Harris will visit Michigan, a key battleground state where polls show a tight race. But Harris will also have support from former President Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen, who are travelling to Pennsylvania to campaign for her. Donald Trump, meanwhile, will head to Atlanta, Georgia, after his rally on Sunday at New York's Madison Square Garden, an event that has been criticised after comments made by some of the speakers, including one instance where a comic described Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. The latest polling in the New York Times shows Harris leading Trump by a single percentage point nationally, and the swing states, which are likely to decide the final outcome, are also within the margin of error.
And new records, but not good ones. The World Meteorological Organization says concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere hit all-time highs last year. Giles Gibson has the details.
The head of the WMO says this report should set alarm bells ringing amongst decision makers, adding that the planet is clearly off track to meet the goals of the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now 151% higher than pre-industrial levels, and for methane, levels are 265% higher. The UN body says that greenhouse gas emissions and wildfires are partly to blame for these record-breaking figures.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can take control of the airwaves and talk about whatever is important to you. 603-283-6160. Again, the number 603-283-6160. And with you tonight, it's Aria.
And Mr. Penguin.
And yeah, you can call in, talk about anything that's on your mind, whatever is important to you. And even if we weren't here the last time you called into the show and had a conversation with people, you're welcome to join in and carry on the conversation with us. Because we do generally have different people on the show every night that we're doing the show. And the result of that is that you may get very different opinions on something if you call one night versus calling another night. Now, on some things, you're going to get about the same opinion. Like if you want to talk about voting, probably everyone who does the show is going to say that voting is stupid and pointless and a waste of time. However, that's not necessarily going to be the case. Maybe we do have some people who love voting. I doubt it, but it's not impossible. But I suspect that's similar to what happened with Saturday night. Apparently, the caller got into a discussion with the host Saturday night about idling cars. And again, I'm just speculating, but it seems that what happened was that one of the hosts said, what's the big deal? It can't be that much pollution or something to that effect, which caused the guy to look into it and do the numbers. And he calculated 300 billion pounds of carbon or something. I don't remember the numbers he spit out because he spit out a lot of numbers. I suspect there's some flaws in there. I doubt that it is linear in how much it produces on a given scale. I didn't put that correctly. I doubt that the numbers scale in the way that he was assuming that they scale, because 300 billion pounds is a whole lot of pounds. And I don't know. I just don't know.
I mean, and how are we supposed to interpret it, like in terms of contexts, right?
Right.
Like, I don't know, like just bringing up a statistic just is like, okay, I'm not really sure how much that helps.
It's also not true to suggest that carbon just like sits there in the atmosphere either, right? Trees consume carbon dioxide and they produce oxygen. So in some areas, that's going to be less of a problem. One of the reasons you have so much smog in cities is that there aren't trees around to consume some of that carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. Well, I don't know if trees consume carbon monoxide. I'm not a botanist. I know nothing about trees or plants. I mean, I know a little bit. I know that they're green generally because of chlorophyll, right? I'm not completely clueless, but I'm not an expert on trees. I do know, however, that they consume carbon dioxide and use it to make oxygen. So in rural areas, honestly, it's less of a concern for you to idle your car. But it got me to thinking, why would people just crank their car and then play on their phone for a few minutes? But he's not wrong. And I'm pretty sure I do the same thing. Like when I leave the show here tonight, I'm going to go get in my car, I'm going to crank it, and then I'm going to quickly check my messages and send out any responses that I need to send. And then I'm going to enter my GPS navigation, and then I'm going to drive home.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't you have done that before you went outside where it's cold?
No.
Huh.
No. And like, I do that just about every time that like when I leave work, that's one of the things I do. And what made me realize that about myself was that I realized my coworkers do exactly what this guy was talking about. And it doesn't matter what the weather is. Every single one of them.
Well, that seems like it would become, you'd end up building a habit up as a result of the cold weather and then doing it when it's not cold.
Possibly. But every single one of them, every single one of my coworkers who has a car, they go out there at the end of their shift, they crank their car, and then they sit there for a few minutes, probably checking messages, sending out social media updates or whatever, responding to messages, checking emails, and then they leave.
This is, I mean, I feel like this is something that would probably be less common back in the day too. Like this is another example of like, oh, your parents or your grandparents wouldn't have done that because they would be thinking about it. Same thing with the lights.
Well, they couldn't have. They didn't have a phone to, play with before they left.
Yeah, that might be true, but they could still, I mean, they could, I don't know, like they could still be eating food or something in their car or I don't know, something of that nature.
I could see that. Yeah. And you would certainly want to do that before you drove away.
But to me, this almost comes off like as a financial matter.
But people certainly do idle their cars a lot. And when I looked into it to see the statistics of what this guy is talking about, which is what I'm assuming is a habit of people cranking their cars, sitting there for a few minutes, and then leaving. I think 5 minutes is probably a stretch. I think it's probably closer to 2 for most people.
I never even heard of like idling until like, I don't know, maybe a decade ago. Like it never even occurred to me like people would get in their car and then like turn it on and then just idle and sit there.
Not for long, but I suspect, especially people who are under the age of 35 or so, I suspect it's more common for us to do those sorts of things.
If I had heard of idling like before a decade ago, it was probably only in relation to like truck drivers mostly.
Because again,
diesel
I know that I do it, and most of my coworkers probably do it. And I suspect if you give us some thought, listener out there, you'll realize that you probably do it as well.
Probably a little bit.
And I think some of it is probably just wanting one last chance to check for any critical messages before we're driving, and we can't check for critical messages. I suspect that plays a role. Like, I can't send a text message while I'm driving. So, I mean, I guess technically I could, but I'm not going to. So it serves my interest best to do that right before I leave to make sure I haven't missed any last-minute changes or whatever. It's probably a side effect. Now that I'm really thinking more about this, it's probably a side effect of having our phones with us 24/7.
And no texting and driving.
Yeah, and always being plugged into them and always having them demanding our attention. But when you're driving, you can't give your phone your attention. So, and like cranking your car and being about to drive, that's those last few precious minutes before you can't pay any attention to this wonderful little device that you carry all the time. And I couldn't find any statistics about this that the previous caller was talking about. I couldn't find why people idle in their cars before leaving. When I looked into it, all I found was, well, yes, people crank their cars to let them warm up before they drive them. And you no longer have to do that in modern cars and all this other stuff. But that's fundamentally different from what we're talking about. We're talking about people who crank their cars and sit in them and wait. Now, if you're starting your car, I say cranking because I'm from the South and that's just the terminology that we use there. But someone recently at work made fun of me for talking about cranking a car. Like, what else would you call it?
I mean, so I think I don't think I said this on air, but there's another reason I think people do it, and it's because it's in the manual. And I don't know,
some of them, not newer cars.
I don't know exactly which vehicles or types of vehicles. But I think okay, so my partner has a Jeep, and he is constantly telling me, don't turn it on, just drive, turn it on, leave it on for a few minutes and then go. And I don't understand why, because I've never done this before in any other vehicle, but it's something that you're supposed to do. I know with diesel vehicles, not that it's a diesel vehicle, but
well, in all vehicles, it's supposed to, because this result did come up when I was looking into it during the break. The engine oil needs to circulate and warm up and become a little more liquidy.
Is it more in cold weather that you're supposed to do that, or is it also in the warmer weather?
More in cold weather.
Okay.
But that's just because their engine oil needs to be at a certain, I think viscosity is the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
And it's more liquidy at higher temperatures than colder temperatures. It thickens as it gets colder. And that's why, especially in older vehicles, apparently, you should start your car and let it warm up before doing any significant driving.
Oh, okay.
It adds, however, that that's not really the case with most modern cars and engine oils. Most modern cars and modern engine oils, warming up your car is no longer really necessary. I suspect that's not as true when we're talking New Hampshire in January, but that's just a basic Google result that I found. And that's fundamentally different. If you're starting your car to warm it up so that you can leave, and it's 12 degrees outside, or
I just don't have the patience for that.
No one's sitting out there in their car doing that process, though. These people are cranking their car. They're either doing it remotely with the remote start, or they're going out and starting their car and then going back inside. Because that's what I do, because I don't have a remote start either.
I know when I was little, my dad would start the car up, and warm it up for us, and then my mom would take us and the kids, wherever we were going for school or whatever, and in the morning in the wintertime. And that would be idling, I guess.
But your dad would start the car and then go back inside, right?
I don't know that he would go back inside, because that would be a hazard. So he probably wouldn't have done that. But certainly he would have sat there and let it warm up, and then
okay. Most people that I'm familiar with would go back inside. That's certainly what I would do, or it's certainly what I've always done. I would start the car and then go back inside, wait 10 minutes, and then go out there and leave.
Okay.
But that's mostly. I don't care as much about the engine temperature and the engine oil temperature as I care about my comfort.
Right, you turn the heat on.
Right. And I need to let the car warm up in order to generate the heat that I want it to generate. But that has the side effect of also allowing the engine oil to warm up and become, more liquidy, whatever the word is that I'm looking for. So the motive, I guess, doesn't really matter. But that's different from sitting in your car, playing on your phone, idling it, not allowing it to warm up. My gut tells me that it's just because people are doing one last check on their phones and they just aren't ready to put their devices down. What are your thoughts? 603-283-6160. I wish I could have spoken more to that caller Saturday, because that would be the topic here that I'm more interested in, is why people do this. But I couldn't find any real good results. But in my experience, people do it. And I had never really thought about it until that caller pointed it out. But I'm absolutely going to do it in a little over an hour when I leave here. And I'm going to do it. I don't do it on my way to work because I usually leave at the last minute. But on my way home from work, and quite regularly, if I'm not in a rush to get somewhere, I'm going to check my phone one last time before driving away.
I don't know. It still seems to me that even if you do that, like how long does it take you to check your phone?
It's not 5 minutes, certainly.
Yeah,
that's an exaggeration. It's probably between 60 and 120 seconds.
Yeah,
would be my guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably really common. And yeah, it's unnecessarily idling the vehicle, and it's polluting, and it's burning up gasoline. But it's a drop in the bucket, man. I just can't bring myself to care about that. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm a bad person for not caring about that. And I understand why, if you care about pollution and the environment, you would care about that sort of thing. But COVID-19 happened a few years ago, and a lot of banks, all the banks actually throughout the entire United States, closed their lobbies and went drive-through only. And one of these banks around here in Keene is owned by this super progressive, it's not owned, it's managed by this super progressive lady, like super progressive. Like, she took this COVID stuff seriously. And I was friends with her briefly, and she will never be my friend again because I was out there doing the anti-mask protesting stuff on Central Square on Friday nights, and that just made me the unforgivable devil. Like, they would call mutual friends of ours and say, I can't believe you're still associating with Aria. Did you see what she's doing? This is totally unacceptable, and stuff like that. Like, just completely unhinged. They took this COVID stuff seriously. But they also take environmental stuff seriously. And as a result of COVID-19, there were cars idling for enormous lengths of time in these drive-thrus at banks and just in drive-thrus throughout the United States. While saving people's lives, quote unquote, air quotes, finger quotes, whatever, they were polluting. They were pumping huge amounts of carcinogens and carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and other crap into the atmosphere. So that wasn't a good solution either, but that was what they did. And their justification was, well, if it saves just one life to close our lobbies and have all of these cars idling for hours because they were also significantly slower at this. You would be at the bank for an hour, just idling, just wasting time, playing on your phone.
Yep.
Trying to get your banking stuff done. It's very frustrating to watch all of this happen. This is why a lot of modern cars, I think it's electric vehicles, they turn themselves off when they're stopped. And then they restart themselves when you press the gas to leave at red lights. And I hate this so much. I've never driven one of these cars, and I hopefully will never have to drive one of these cars. But just as a concept, I hate that so much. Because I know, having done delivery driving before, way back in the day when I was, 22 years old or whatever, it's really bad for your vehicle to constantly turn it off and start it and turn it off and start it and make a bunch of short little drives. That's very bad for your vehicle. And these modern vehicles do that on purpose at intersections. So they take all that stopping and starting and they multiply it by 4 or 5 times.
Is that bad for like a modern vehicle though? Like what's the cause of the it being bad, right? Like is it something that's like, oh, it's just that's not how it's designed, therefore turning it on and off is bad, or is it?
I would say it's probably electrically and mechanically bad for it in the same way that it's bad for your computer to constantly restart it or to shut it down and then start it up again. There's always that initial little power, spike is the word I'm looking for. And it's not, under normal usage, going to ever create an issue. However, if you're shutting down and starting your computer 50 times a day, you're going to burn out some components much faster than you would under normal usage. a lot of people don't even shut down their computers anymore. I can't remember the last time I shut down a computer.
I don't even know. Like, I mean, I've done a lot of testing where I've turned the computers on and off, on and off, on and off. I don't know. Like, this is one of these things where I'm not sure if there's like any truth to the thing that we've been told. And
honestly, I'm just going off of the things we've been told. I don't know if they're true either.
Yeah.
I would imagine they are because it makes sense logically.
I mean, they've got capacitors in them too that hold a little bit of electricity. So it's not like it's actually going off completely, like even when you turn it off. And there's a constant draw on that power supply, even when it's off. So like, I don't know. I just don't, I'm not an electrical engineer and I don't know what kind of effect it will have, but it certainly doesn't appear to me like it should have much of an effect. But
well, it would have a small effect, and it would only be over a long period of time. Like, my understanding of it would be that if you had two computers, one that stayed on all the time and one that you shut down and started, like, I don't know, let's say once a day, that the one that you shut down and restarted once a day would lose components at somewhat of a faster rate than the other.
The thing that I'm thinking of that maybe why it's been said don't do that is because of the traditional spinning disks, and the drives would spin up and they'd spin down. And I think that was that because of electricity usage or something like that?
Well, it's certainly not the case with solid state drives anyway.
Right, it's not. I know with solid state drives, there's a risk to the data. But at the same time, there's usually power going to it. So the data gets flushed to the drive before it's actually powered off. But if you unplug it without shutting it down properly, there's a risk of damaging the drive. But again, it's more with the cheap drives that don't have, I guess, capacitors to keep it from losing power.
Do you remember several months ago, I told the story of building my new computer and running into issues where it wouldn't start, and it was because DDR5 was just taking forever to initialize?
Yes, that's normal.
What I've learned since is that, yes, it's not just that first startup, though. If I restart my computer, it's down a full 10 minutes before it comes back up. And that is... How is this at all even remotely a leap forward? Now, granted, I don't have to restart my computer very often. I think I've done it twice since I built the thing, but it's noticeable. It's like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And I just want to remark on that real quick. I thought, based on my reading, that it was just an initialization thing and that it would only happen that first time. But no, it's every single time you restart this computer, it takes a solid 5 to 10 minutes before there's a display.
Is it every time that it's booting up? Because I thought if it was powered off and you had it left plugged in and then you turned it back on, it would start up faster.
All I've done is click restart.
Yeah.
So I haven't even done a full shutdown or unplugged it or anything.
I wouldn't have expected
it's only
that
happened twice
to cause it to be
so maybe
really long time to.
Maybe it decreases over time, and I just haven't rebooted it enough to get to a noticeable decrease. I don't know.
It might be the computer, the individual system too, as opposed to other DDR5 systems.
It could be. But that's been my experience, and I don't understand.
I know what you're talking about.
And I like it, but
I've experienced it, plenty of times with newer systems, but I don't know that I thought it didn't do it. If you turned it off and turned it back on right away, it wouldn't do that. It wouldn't take 10 minutes to boot up because it's like a really long it's not 5 minutes maybe, but it feels like it's 5 minutes. And if you
10 minutes is an exaggeration.
Yeah.
It doesn't take that long anymore. It's probably closer to 5 at this point. But that first one, first one, that took forever.
Yes, definitely. So much so that people think their systems aren't working, they return them.
That's exactly what I thought. I didn't return it. I took everything out. This computer that I just put together, I took all of the components out one by one and then put them all back in one by one. And then I replaced the power supply and I did this.
What's funny?
Did another thing.
My partner's always complaining about the big warning labels on motherboard boxes now, but what they need to have is a warning label for that.
Yes, they do.
Not for the whatever nonsense it is. It's like this is, I forget what the warning labels are, but they're so stupid. This contains a battery or something like that. The little coin batteries.
Oh yeah, the choking hazard for 3-year-olds or whatever.
Yeah. What 3-year-old is going to be opening a motherboard box?
That's a fair question.
What 3-year-old is going to be opening up a computer, right? But these are on all the computer boxes, on all of the motherboard boxes. It's and they're getting larger and larger, these warning labels. It's
A warning about that DDR5 issue definitely would have saved me some time.
Yeah.
Because I kept reading about it online, and I was like, that's nonsense. I've never heard about that. In my years of building computers, I've never heard that, well, if you just leave it sitting there for a while, eventually it will work.
Yep.
And I was like, that's crazy. But no, that was exactly right. It still blows my mind to this day when I think about it.
The only other example of it that I can think of is when you put in a ton of RAM. And it's doing checking on the RAM, like the startup tests. If you have that turned on, that's the only other time I can think of. But at least then
I do, but I don't have what would be considered a ton of RAM right now. I think it's 128 gigabytes or something, which is a lot, but it's not a ton at this point.
That's still quite a bit of RAM.
It's excessive to my needs, certainly. But there are servers that are running significantly more.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, so 256 gigabytes is like the max now on like modern systems, like desktop systems.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's a good amount. So anyway, we wanted to talk about this, and that is the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe thing. He made some jokes at a Trump rally. I don't know. I'm trying to get to the actual thing. I see him defending himself. I want to see the actual joke that he made, but I'm not seeing that. So basically, he said something to the effect of, are you guys aware that there's this giant floating trash ball out there in the ocean? I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Oh, wow.
He said that. And yeah, that's messed up. And a lot of people got really upset and said that's racist. Well, it's not. He's talking about an island, and it's not racist to talk about an island, right? It's not racist to talk about an island. It would be racist to talk about its inhabitants. And maybe he would be calling the inhabitants trash in that analogy. Maybe that's the part that I wasn't getting.
Same thing that when people call New York City trash, it's not.
New York City is trash though.
Well, I know, but Puerto Rico is a poor. It's not exactly. It's sort of similar in a lot of ways. It's impoverished, and I don't know.
It is, yeah.
So I don't know if that's being racist or if it's being obviously there is a percentage of the population that is native.
Oh, I found the actual quote here. Let's see. And there's a lot going on. I don't know if you know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. I think it's called Puerto Rico. At another point, he said Latinos love making babies. I don't know anything about Puerto Rico, the island, or the place.
Yeah.
I met a lot of Puerto Ricans when I was in federal prison, and I would call myself friends with a lot of these Spanish people that I met in prison, and fantastic, wonderful people. The fact that I didn't speak Spanish didn't make any difference to them. They were friendly with me. I was friendly. In fact, they were the people I hung out with most. I don't know anything about the actual nation of Puerto Rico, though, other than that, a lot of the Puerto Ricans that I met.
Puerto Rico is part of the United States. It's a territory, I believe. Yeah.
And that's why they ended up in American federal prison.
Yep.
Because they broke an American law, and they're subject to American law. They take a lot of pride in having been from Puerto Rico, but this is equally true of the Dominicans. The Dominican Republic is apparently a U.S. territory as well.
Yep.
I never understood why, what am I looking for? Colombians were in the American prison system, because Colombia is not a U.S. territory, is it? I guess it's entirely possible they were Colombian American.
They might also be extradited from Colombia because of the drug war.
Could also be that. I was never clear about it. But anyway, it's a messed up thing to say, and it's probably not a good look for Donald Trump. But even Donald Trump's campaign distanced themselves from this joke and was like, whoa, that went. We don't agree with that. Yeah. So I don't know why people are bent out of shape. There's more coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Tired of the ever-inflating US dollar? You can live your life on Dash instead with some handy websites. BitRefill.com has been accepting Dash for years and has a ton of big-name retailers and brands including grocers, gas stations, phone refills, Amazon, and even prepaid MasterCards. Plus, many of their gift cards are available at a discount. But what about paying your bills? Spritz.finance can do that, and they can send dollars to your bank account in case you still need those for some reason. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Haya. North Korean forces are in Russian territory, according to NATO's Secretary General. The head of the Western Defense Pact says the region in question is partially controlled by Ukraine, signalling that the troops are now or soon to be in direct combat. William Denzilo reports from Brussels, where NATO's headquartered.
In a brief address, NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte said the confirmation of North Korean forces in Kursk marked a significant escalation in the conflict. The comments came as a South Korean delegation provided an update to the North Atlantic Council. Rutte added that the partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang posed a threat to both the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. Ukraine's foreign minister says it's been warning allies about this threat for weeks, and that it urgently needs long-range missiles and a green light to hit targets deep into Russian territory.
Thousands of Georgians have gathered outside the country's parliament to support their president, who's cast doubt on an election result which saw the ruling party hold on to power. NATO, the European Union and the United States have all called for a full investigation into a litany of allegations made by monitoring missions of vote fraud. Here in the US, it's the final week of a grueling election campaign. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are facing off with an exhausting schedule of rallies. Mitch McCann's been following.
On Monday local time, Vice President Kamala Harris will visit Michigan, a key battleground state where polls show a tight race. But Harris will also have support from former President Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen, who are travelling to Pennsylvania to campaign for her. Donald Trump, meanwhile, will head to Atlanta, Georgia, after his rally on Sunday at New York's Madison Square Garden, an event that has been criticised after comments made by some of the speakers, including one instance where a comic described Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. The latest polling in the New York Times shows Harris leading Trump by a single percentage point nationally, and the swing states, which are likely to decide the final outcome, are also within the margin of error.
And new records, but not good ones. The World Meteorological Organization says concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere hit all-time highs last year. Giles Gibson has the details.
The head of the WMO says this report should set alarm bells ringing amongst decision makers, adding that the planet is clearly off track to meet the goals of the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now 151% higher than pre-industrial levels, and for methane, levels are 265% higher. The UN body says that greenhouse gas emissions and wildfires are partly to blame for these record-breaking figures.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today in more detail at a decision by India and China to bury the hatchet over a border dispute that has lasted since the 1960s. They have agreed to deconfliction along the so-called line of control that separates the two countries in the mountains of the Himalayas. They have engaged in a military standoff in that icy, inhospitable terrain for decades. But analyst Bob McMahon of America's Council on Foreign Relations says the agreement could be the beginning of the standoff's end.
It's the first time in more than 5 years that they had formal talks. They've had informal talks, but these were formal talks they had on the sidelines of the BRICS summit, and details are still to come, and those are going to be really important to watch. But this line of actual control, which is more than 2,100 miles, they are now saying they will jointly patrol contested areas. These were what you would call confidence building measures, because both sides have been building things like roads, seen as the run-up to seizing more territory or bringing in more military materiel and so forth to be able to beef up their presence and create facts on the ground for what they claim to be their place. It's still a long road ahead for them to get into any sort of process where they can actually mark out an agreed-upon border. But it's still in all really important.
The deal was announced at the BRICS summit last week in the Russian city of Kazan, and it was partly brokered by Russian President Vladimir Putin after several rounds of talks over many weeks.
A reminder of our top stories. North Korean forces are in Russian territory, according to NATO's Secretary General. Tens of thousands of Georgians gathered outside the country's parliament to support their president, who's cast doubt on an election result which saw the ruling party hold on to power. And here in the US, it's the final week of a grueling election campaign. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are facing off with an exhausting schedule of rallies. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington.
Geneticists gathered at a conference this week to debate the ethics of cloning human beings and compelling them to fight to the death in a rock-filled pit for our amusement. Experts at the conference reportedly discussed questions key to the scientific field, such as the morality of arming hundreds of clones with maces and pitting them against each other on a small platform surrounded by molten lava.
Cloning humans and goading them into viciously battling certainly raises ethical questions. It's important that we consider this topic with an open mind. Whether or not we should be stranding clones on a desert island, assigning them weapons by a lottery system and making them murder one another tournament style remains a matter up for debate.
And in this week's local news, a man is wearing a low-cut swimsuit as though a public pool is some kind of sun-kissed Sardinian cove. In other news, China's veteran reporters blast the decline of traditional state-run journalism. A new study finds human hearing is most acute when listening to arguing parents from the top of the stairs. And fireflies almost managed to salvage a local man's shitty day.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160 if you want to join the discussion. That's 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
And Mr. Penguin.
And Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash, short for digital cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency that is made for spending. You can pay your bills with Dash at spritz.finance. Plus, they can send dollars to your bank if you still need those for something. Gasoline, for example, is kind of hard to purchase with cryptocurrency, although with things like Spritz.finance, it's probably possible. We want to say thank you to the Dash DAO for sending us, 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It's easy to get and to use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. One more time, that is dash.org. Excellent cryptocurrency, in my opinion, and certainly one that's worth looking into. So check that out, dash.org. Now, this is a story that I've had for, in my news feed, I guess I should say, for several weeks. Is blood thicker than water? Should family always come first? And I think this is a good topic for Chris and I to get into because I don't associate with any of my family. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, most of my family is not worth associating with. My mother, of course, she was murdered when I was 12. I can't say that she would be worth associating with at this point because she was hardcore drug addict, meth user. I actually don't know if she was into meth, or I know she loved opiates, but I don't know if she ever actually crossed the line into meth. I had heard that she did, but I don't know because I was 10 years old at the time. So I don't know, but I can't imagine that she would have been much better off, really, than my father was at the time that he died a few years ago. And he was just a piece of crap, homophobic, transphobic piece of crap, who the only contact he had with me was on one of my sister's Facebook posts, where he decided to rail endlessly about me being trans. And that was pretty much it. And it was a very bizarre experience because he made out like he had all of these questions for me and other stuff. So I simply responded that, I was there and had been for several years if he had wanted to ask any questions or have any conversation, but he clearly didn't want to do that. And then he died a few months later, and literally no one was sad about it because he was a drug addict who lived with his mother, couldn't hold a job, had no interest in holding down a job, and who just wasted away his final years on Earth, his final decade on Earth. It would be sad if he hadn't brought it all entirely on himself, but he did by being a toxic individual, a liar, a perpetual liar, just an all-around terrible person. And I really don't think my mother would have been any different if she hadn't died when I was 12, honestly. She was exactly like my dad, based on what I've heard, only the other gender, right? Because obviously. So there's my grandmother, who is a good person, and although she did bring a lot of strife to me as I was growing up, because I am trans, and I am from Mississippi, and so is she, and she's a fundamentalist Christian, and these things did not go over well at all.
Yikes.
Yeah. But that was when I was a child. She has since, I don't know about come around, but she gave me a bunch of jewelry after my father died. And that was a sign of, I could only accept it as a sign of reconciliation because she gave me women's jewelry after having spent most of my childhood, denying me women's clothes and women's jewelry and makeup and all that other stuff. And, punishing me and doing all sorts of horrific things to me because I was trans and wanted to pursue being trans. But, she's 90-something years old, and I guess time has given her the ability to reflect on some things and decide that it's just not worth it to just accept me for who I am. We've never had that conversation, though, so I don't really know how she feels. My sister was very much anti-trans and didn't want to have anything to do with me. In fact, about once a year, I'm reminded of the horrifically long 7-part text message she sent me when I came out to her, basically telling me that she had decided to raise her children in a Christian way and that she didn't approve of it, and that it just meant that I wasn't going to be able to have any contact with my nephews, one of whom I love to death. We played video games together. I helped raise this kid, right? I'm the reason he loves video games so much. And to tell me something like that was just so out of line, because she was like, I'm not going to ruin his innocence by letting him be around you or whatever. Yeah, it was.
How is that ruining his innocence?
In the worldview of these kinds of crazy hardcore Christians, right? It somehow hurts him to know that a person can be trans, I guess. I don't know. I don't understand that mentality, but that was what she said. And that was the way things stood for several years. And meanwhile, she started this makeup group on Facebook that grew to 20, 30, 40, I think it's at 70,000 members now. And she's the creator of it. And they started talking about me in this group when I ran for sheriff. And this allowed her to say, oh my God, guys, because they were all like, hey, oh my God, this person is awesome. Look at this trans person running for sheriff. F the police. This is amazing. And then suddenly she was like, oh my God, guys, that's my sister. And that was when she actually came around and became friendly with me again. But at this point, all she ever does is ask me for money. And I don't give her any. So I don't have any contact with her anyway. The gist of all of this is that I'm not related to anyone that I want to have any contact with regularly. I love my nephews to death, and I wish I could talk to the older one especially and tell him, look, the life that you're living in this way with my sister down here, you don't have to live this way. Like, you don't have to stress living paycheck to paycheck, worrying about how your bills are going to be paid and all of this other stuff. You don't have to live that way. You could choose something else. But I can't have that conversation with him. There's nothing I could do to help my nephew and get him out of that situation that she knows he shouldn't be in. But, you know, these things are what they are. And it sucks, but overall, there's no one else in my family that I want to have any contact with whatsoever. I lost contact with my mother's side of the family around the time that my mother vanished. She officially vanished, but we later learned that it was because, you know, she was murdered and her body has just never been found. Yeah, it's a shocking, horrific story, really. But like, I was 12 then. I've had plenty of time to just like deal with it. So I can talk about it matter-of-factly. But anyway, none of them had anything to do with us as we were growing up. So I don't have anything to do with them now. And it's inconsequential. And I think that's a good thing. I have plenty of family up here in New Hampshire. I would call Ian my older brother. I would call Mark kind of an uncle. I would never actually call Mark Uncle Mark. God, that would be awful. I would never under any circumstances do that. But like if I need some sort of, I don't want to say fatherly advice because I'm never in a position to need fatherly advice. But if I'm curious about something like, these people keep contacting me about my car's extended warranty. Should I look into this? Then Mark is the person that I would go to with that sort of query. You know, he plays that sort of a role in my life as this older, experienced male person who I can go to with some of these questions that aren't immediately obvious to someone who hasn't been through those sorts of things. And this is why people have uncles and fathers and grandfathers and stuff that they can go to. I have all of those things too. I'm just not related to them by blood. I have an amazing older sister who's coming over to hang out with me tonight after work. And I'm not related to her by blood. It's very easily, this is common in trans people's lives, apparently. They're called chosen families. And I don't know if I really like that terminology because obviously these people are not my family. I'm not related to them by blood. And I think that's more important because I'm choosing to spend my time with them. I'm choosing to have them as part of my life. And they're choosing to have me as part of their lives. Whereas with your family, you don't get that choice. So certainly family should not always come first, in my opinion. To answer the leading question of this article, I don't think family should get out of me whatever they put into me. And they're not doing anything to try to be a part of my life. Why should I do anything to try to be part of theirs? Like, I went to federal prison and not a single one of these family members, actually, that's not true. My grandmother did write me. My grandmother did write me when I was in prison, and I wrote her back when I was in prison. But since then, no contact whatsoever. My sister couldn't even be bothered to check her emails in order to respond to me when I was in federal prison. Months would go by without her responding. And like, you're supposed to be family. My quote, older sister who's coming over to hang out tonight we emailed every single day. Not a single day went by that we did not email. And that's way more important to me than the fact that I came from the same womb as this other person. So family to me, not an important consideration, sadly. And I'm not alone in this. These cliches about the importance of family abound, despite the recognition that family, they say familial relations, the word is filial, but I'm not going to get into that, are oftentimes hard, if not downright dysfunctional. Well, look, if you have a relationship in your life that is hard, get rid of it. Yeah. If you have a relationship in your life that is dysfunctional, end it. Get rid of it.
Yeah, this is something like I feel like most people tolerate their family, but they're not necessarily like close.
I don't understand that mentality of, you have to, I mean, they literally point out that some family relationships are downright dysfunctional. Why would you want to maintain a dysfunctional relationship? That's crazy to me. The obvious thing is to end it. But over the last few years, a discussion has emerged about a somewhat taboo move, cutting ties altogether with family members deemed toxic. And I've seen this a lot on social media. Look, because your uncle or whatever votes for Trump, I don't think that's a good reason to cut ties with them, because their support for Trump probably isn't going to have any actual effect on your life. Their voting for Donald Trump isn't going to have any actual effect on your life. And I understand where people are coming from to a degree when they say, if you can support and vote for someone who is going to do harm to me and my kind, then I can't be your friend. You're no family to me and stuff like that. And I kind of get it. If you truly believe that Donald Trump is going to cause harm to LGBT people, I can kind of get why you would not want to be friends with someone who was choosing to support Donald Trump. But the reality is, one, Donald Trump doesn't seem to really be doing anything to harm LGBT people. And he didn't when he was president either.
You know, the problem with this, though, is like it's not like the opposition is any better. And maybe you can say they're better against LGBT. Fine, maybe we can agree that they're better when it comes to LGBT folk, but who cares? They're terrible when it comes to like immigrants just as much as they are, you know, the other side. So it's like it's like, okay, so even if they're not harming me personally, they're still horrible people. Like, it's not like, yeah.
It is a very narcissistic way of viewing things. You're absolutely right to suggest that, oh, well, the Democrats are friendlier to LGBT people, so obviously I would support them. Yeah, but they're still separating families at the border and throwing people in prison for crossing a line, an imaginary line in the desert. So, like, they're still committing acts of evil, even if they're not doing it against you personally, and you should still care about that. It's a really good point. But even then, like Donald Trump, even if he is, I mean, he's not anti-LGBT, but even if he was, your uncle supporting him isn't going to cause Trump to get elected or cause Trump to lose the election. One vote isn't going to matter in one direction or the other. You should not let politicians who don't know you exist end the relationships you have with people who do know you exist. Donald Trump doesn't know you or care about you. Why would you let him end your relationship with someone who does care about you?
Like somebody with that mindset, to me, there's no way I'm going to be that close to that person. Like it's completely irrelevant whether they vote for Trump or not, right? Like,
I don't understand the mentality of letting politics define our relationships in this way at all. There's a lot of people, especially here in New Hampshire, who won't date other people unless they're libertarians. And I can't get on board with that either. If I have no idea what my current boyfriend's political positions are. He seems to sort of align with being an anarchist to some degree, but he just more or less doesn't pay attention to it as far as I can tell. Based on we haven't discussed it, obviously, and I don't think we're ever going to, but based on the things that he said here and there, I would guess that he's sort of a left-leaning anarchist. And I don't mean left economically. He's not a communist or a socialist or any of that, but he's pro-tolerant. I mean, he's trans, and he's got at least one maybe trans kid or one gay kid. I don't remember. He's got several kids. Anyway, I don't think he's a socialist or a communist. He just leans toward that spectrum socially. He's socially accepting and tolerant, and that would be what I would characterize as a left-leaning anarchist. Someone similar to me, in fact. I don't know what his economic positions are, and I don't really care. It's not something we're going to discuss. And I'm certainly not going to let us get into an argument about it or let it determine our relationship or whether or not we can be friends or whether or not we can, be boyfriend and girlfriend. To me, that's crazy.
It's completely based on looks, right?
Looks certainly play a large role. I'm not going to say they don't, right? Your first attraction to someone is almost entirely based on looks. Now, he is also funny, and he's got a lot of awesome characteristics that I love, but yeah, he's also pretty good looking.
It probably would be wrong to claim that that's not the first thing anybody is looking for.
Yeah, no doubt. And no one is going to date someone that they think is ugly.
Yeah,
so
that's probably very true.
Anyway, getting back into the story, called going no contact, this form of estrangement, cutting people off, usually involves adult children cutting ties with their parents. It might happen after years of abuse or when a parent disapproves of a child who has come out as LGBT. These things still happen a lot, and I don't know the frequency that these things happen because social medias tend to become an echo chamber. And most of my friends on social media platforms are LGBT accepting, or they are LGBT themselves. Now, this is obvious. And I posted about this recently. If I'm scrolling Facebook and I see you post some anti-trans nonsense, I'm not going to stop and argue with you. I'm not going to comment it. I'm just going to remove you from my friends list. I don't need that crap in my life. I'm not going to block you. I'm just going to remove you from my friends list so I don't have to see that crap. You're not my friend anyway if you're out there being anti-trans. How can you be anti-trans while being my friend? If you're my friend, then you're not anti-trans. And if you're anti-trans, then you're not my friend. So the result of that over several years is that all of my friends on Facebook, all 1,000-ish of them, are either LGBT or they're pro-LGBT to some extent or another, or they just don't care about it and don't talk about it. I don't know. I don't ask them because I don't screen people based on that. But I don't need negativity in my life at the same time. And it's the same reason that I cut out my father, basically, and my grandfather, definitely. The last time I talked to my grandfather, he started railing into me about wearing women's clothes. And I was like, look, I said to him, I don't have to deal with this, and I'm not going to. If you want to call me and have an actual conversation, then you have my number. But if this is all you want to talk about, I'm not going to do it. Have a good day. And I hung up and I never spoke to him again, which is fine. But I do see a lot of shared posts from people coming out as LGBT and their parents freaking out about it. Of course, Andrew Solomon. Solomon Key is like something completely different. Andrew Solomon wrote this book called Far From the Tree that I've talked about a lot. He talks about these stories of trans people and gay people who have gone through these experiences where they came out to their parents and they had really bad reception from their parents. Some of these stories are from like 2016. They're very recent. And this sort of thing is still happening. But when you're a child and you're 14 years old, which I wouldn't really call a child, but if you're a teenager, you're 14 years old, and you come out to your parents as gay or lesbian or trans or whatever, you don't really have much recourse if they disapprove. And I say this as someone who's gone through it. All you can do is like bite the bullet and become an adult and cut them off when you're an adult and you've stabilized and are ready to cut them out. It sucks, but yeah, it happens and it still happens. It's probably always going to happen. But I also see a lot of contrasting stories where people come out to their parents and their mom is like, yeah, I know you're gay. I've known that since you were 6. I asked you what you wanted for dinner tonight and stuff like that. So it's a coin toss. But certainly you don't need abusive people in your life. Whether you're LGBT or not, if your parents are abusive or your father is abusive or your mother is abusive, cut them out. Don't allow abusive people in your life. It's that simple. Even Vice President Kamala Harris has been mostly estranged from her father since her parents' divorce. I don't even know why they bothered to mention that. I don't care at all about Kamala Harris or her relationship with her father. The no contact movement has its proponents and detractors. Those in favor say people should disentangle from unhealthy relationships without shame, and that families should be held to the same standards as friends and romantic partners. I don't see any part of that sentence that I could possibly disagree with. Yes, you should disentangle yourself from unhealthy relationships.
There's a varying degree of like relationships, like healthy relationships and like terrible relationships.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, like I'm kind of like, not every relationship is like, it's like black and white like that. Some relationships are just neutral, Very true. But if a relationship is actively unhealthy, if someone in your life is actively toxic. Oh, yeah. Cut them off.
Yeah. In the relationship.
Yeah.
A family absolutely should be held to the same standards as friends and romantic partners. And if someone loves you, they're going to treat you with that same respect and courtesy, whether they're related to you or not. And I don't understand the mentality that, because this person is related to me, I should put up with them being disrespectful or being intolerant or being hostile or abusive or whatever. No, cut them out. It's crazy not to. So I want to see the arguments against this. Those against say that the bar for what constitutes filial trauma has become too low and that some kids who cut off all contact are being selfish. That is true. I know of at least one trans person. I hesitate to call this person trans because this person is almost certainly a trans trender, but I don't want to get too deeply into that. This person transitioned, and within the first month of their transition had told their sister, look, this is who I am now. You can accept it and you can call me by my chosen name, or I can cut you off. It's that simple. Less than a month after transitioning. And I understand you have to draw a line somewhere, but you have to give people time to adapt and adjust to changes in your life before you cut them out. And the person did the same thing with their father, saying, look, I'm your daughter now, and if you don't like that, then I'll just cut you off. And give people a chance. Give people time to accept the changes you're making in your life. It's only fair. If you love them, you will give them that chance. Otherwise, you don't deserve that chance. There's more coming up. 603-283-6160.
The chimpanzee spends most of its day in the jungle, carelessly swinging from tree to tree and picking mites off itself, instead of building shelter and teaching itself how to read. This chimp is named Bolo, and researchers at Duke University have shown that he can solve three-dimensional logic puzzles, an impressive feat indeed, until you learn that human children as young as 3 are also able to solve the puzzle. Even a mentally handicapped human is capable of verbal speech, something no chimpanzee has ever been able to accomplish, despite working vocal cords capable of howling in irritation after soiling itself. Chimps have been observed using tools, but their tools are little more than sticks. Even driving and preparing pancakes, tasks we leave to the stupidest, least educated humans, lay beyond the capabilities of the chimp.
This is the Onion News Network.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire. North Korean forces are in Russian territory, according to NATO's Secretary General. The head of the Western Defence Pact says the region in question is partially controlled by Ukraine, signalling that the troops are now or soon to be in direct combat. William Denzilo reports from Brussels, where NATO's headquartered.
In a brief address, NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte said the confirmation of North Korean forces in Kursk marked a significant escalation in the conflict. The comments came as a South Korean delegation provided an update to the North Atlantic Council. Rutte added that the partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang posed a threat to both the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. Ukraine's foreign minister says it's been warning allies about this threat for weeks, and that it urgently needs long-range missiles and a green light to hit targets deep into Russian territory.
Thousands of Georgians have gathered outside the country's parliament to support their president, who's cast doubt on an election result which saw the ruling party hold on to power. NATO, the European Union and the United States have all called for a full investigation into a litany of allegations made by monitoring missions of vote fraud. Here in the US, it's the final week of a grueling election campaign. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are facing off with an exhausting schedule of rallies. Mitch McCann's been following.
On Monday local time, Vice President Kamala Harris will visit Michigan, a key battleground state where polls show a tight race. But Harris will also have support from former President Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen, who are travelling to Pennsylvania to campaign for her. Donald Trump, meanwhile, will head to Atlanta, Georgia, after his rally on Sunday at New York's Madison Square Garden, an event that has been criticised after comments made by some of the speakers, including one instance where a comic described Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. The latest polling in the New York Times shows Harris leading Trump by a single percentage point nationally, and the swing states, which are likely to decide the final outcome, are also within the margin of error.
And new records, but not good ones. The World Meteorological Organization says concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere hit all-time highs last year. Giles Gibson has the details.
The head of the WMO says this report should set alarm bells ringing amongst decision makers, adding that the planet is clearly off track to meet the goals of the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now 151% higher than pre-industrial levels, and for methane, levels are 265% higher. The UN body says that greenhouse gas emissions and wildfires are partly to blame for these record-breaking figures.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160. If you would like to join us, that's 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria and Mr. Penguin. I want to say thank you to Monero. Monero is a person, not a cryptocurrency. Well, Monero is also a cryptocurrency, but the entity that I'm thinking right now is a person calling themselves Monero. They are a member of the AMPS program. That's a member of our Patreon. We are largely Patreon supported. You can find that at patreon.freetalklive.com, or you can go to amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. That stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. If you value Free Talk Live, if you like the show and want to help us reach a larger audience, joining the AMPS program is the best way to do it. That helps pay for things like calls to radio stations and advertising the podcast and the radio show and the audio archives and the video feeds and all of that's great stuff, and keeps the equipment here up and running and all of those other wonderful things. It's tremendously helpful. amps.freetalklive.com. Thank you so much, Monero, for your support. I also really appreciate that you've presumably named yourself after Monero cryptocurrency, so well done on that. I love Monero. It's always, I want to say always been my favorite cryptocurrency, and I think it probably has, but I'm not completely sure that that statement is true. There have been some other good privacy coins, but I think Monero has always been my mainstay as far as like my favorite cryptocurrency.
Monero works.
It does. It works very well. So thank you. That's amps.freetalklive.com. I'd appreciate you checking out, and there is a free tier, I believe. So you don't actually have to pay to sign up and get some of the updates. There is stuff there that is only available to paid members, like the AMP-only version of the podcast, and of course the Free Talk cast that is being uploaded there, now that I've made it a habit of doing that. The Free Talk cast, as we mentioned previously, is a separate show that we're doing. It's a separate podcast that we're doing once a week, and that is being made available on our Patreon earlier than it is otherwise available. So if you're not a member of our Patreon, then you're getting Free Talk Cast later than everyone else. But if you are a member of our Patreon, then you're getting it sooner than everyone else. And you can join for free, but we appreciate your support, and $5 a month is all it takes to get you there. And that's amps.freetalklive.com. Thank you, Monero, and thank you to everyone who is showing their support for Free Talk Live through the AMPS program, amps.freetalklive.com. And it is just Patreon again. So if you have a Patreon account, you can just search for Free Talk Live there, and that will take you directly to it. Super easy to find, super easy to join. I love Patreon, and I love everything that it does. I just wish it wasn't so centrally controlled. Once upon a time, we did have an independent AMP program that we ran, and we had our own payment processor, and we handled the entire thing in-house. But then Ian and I got raided, as well as 4 other people. Well, several other people got raided, but 4 others were arrested on March the 16th of 2021. And shortly after that, the people processing payments for us were like, hey, yeah, we don't want to process any more payments for you guys because you just got arrested for operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. So they didn't say that.
Even though there was no connection at all?
What do you mean?
Well, between the sales of crypto and the payment processor,
correct,
with the accepting of the AMPS program.
But I had the same thing happen with several bank accounts. They were closed despite never having received any money from Bitcoin. One of them, all they ever received was my paycheck from work. They still closed my account. And we don't know because they didn't say, but we suspect that's why the payment processor broke up with us as well, which sent us to Patreon, who now handles it for us, and that has its advantages and disadvantages. One main disadvantage is that we can no longer easily accept cryptocurrency for you to join the program. Back in the day, there was a QR code there on freetalklive.com or amp.freetalklive.com. You could scan that, send it, tell us about it, shoot us an email, and we could sign you up that way. But, time moves on, and people got upset with us when we were selling Bitcoin, and the result is that Ian is in prison, I'm in federal probation, and we no longer have a payment processor. So, been a rough time here on the AMPS program, but we do have a Patreon, and thank you so much to everyone for joining that and supporting that. I rambled on there a bit longer than I intended to, but I was actually curious as we went into this final segment because I still haven't heard anything tonight from Sarah or David. And then as I was thinking that, we got a call from David from New Mexico. David, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind tonight?
You're psycho. I'm sorry, psychic.
I've been accused of being both things on occasion.
Oh, well, cool. I'm relieved.
So what's on your mind tonight?
Two things. One, the more important one second, which is about the state-of-the-art satellite, cellular, etc. But the other one is Dominican Republic is not a territory.
It isn't?
No.
Okay.
What is it? It's not a state.
It's its own country. It's a nation.
Huh. I wonder why there were so many
Puerto
Dominicans. No, the Dominican Republic.
Oh, the Dominican Republic.
I thought I said previously that it was a U.S. territory because I thought that it was because there were probably as many Dominicans in federal prison as there were Puerto Ricans.
Are we a protectorate of the Dominican Republic?
I don't know what treaties we have with them.
We might be a protectorate of the Dominican Republic, and they're independent. Because I think you might be right. They're not a territory like Puerto Rico.
Right.
I think they are somehow connected to the United States. It's just not. Yeah. And the answer is
no, David, you are correct. I mean, I wasn't disputing you about this. I just thought they were because there were a lot of Dominicans in federal prison when I was in there. But so I looked it up just because I was curious whether the Dominican Republic was under U.S. jurisdiction at all.
Yep.
And they're not.
Is it a protectorate?
You thought they were?
Yeah, I thought they were because there were a lot of Dominicans in federal prison with me.
I don't know about because they all look alike. I thought it was because they all look alike.
What do you mean?
It's a joke. It's a racist joke.
No, yeah. Okay. No.
Yeah.
And
what?
Dominicans varied a lot in their appearances. Like Puerto Ricans, I could generally tell that they were Puerto Rican. They did not all look the same, but they do share some characteristics, just like most people from France share some characteristics, or most people from England share some characteristics. And the same is true of people from Puerto Rico. But there were people there who were Dominican who were just, I thought they were white. And they were Dominican. And then there were others who I would have thought they were black. And nope, they're Dominican.
Yeah, but Dominican is a nationality and white and black is a race.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, because it's all of the above. Because the whole of the Caribbean is essentially what's left of any Native Americans, which is almost nothing, and then Africans and Europeans, which would be primarily Southern Europeans, Latins, Spanish, Portuguese, and then in more modern day, then Northern Europeans, which would be your classic white guy. However, the Spanish Europeans were what you call the quote-unquote white Hispanics.
Right.
Because they have, in the words of a German girlfriend of mine, they're as white as I am.
So that's true in a lot of these Spanish countries, but it was not just the Dominican. It was noticeable among the Dominicans, though, that they varied more greatly than other nationalities. Like there were no people from Puerto Rico who I would have thought were white. All of the Puerto Ricans that were in federal prison were obviously Spanish of some kind, but with the Dominicans, it wasn't as obvious, I guess. And that's all I'm getting at.
Cool. No, I can buy it. I never thought about it, but now that you say it, yeah, I can see that.
But the result was that I just assumed that the Dominican Republic, like Puerto Rico, was a subsidiary of some sort of the United States, but I was absolutely wrong on that, so thank you for the correction.
Yeah, and the connection between the United States and the Dominican Republic is baseball, as the quote goes. Baseball been very, very good to me.
It's also big in Puerto Rico.
Yes,
in Costa
baseball
Rica.
Been very, very good to me.
I guess.
Very, very good. Yes.
So what else?
And if you don't know where that comes from, you can look it up. So an article from PC Mag to get us all up to speed, which came out the 28th, which is today. And just paraphrasing, pulling a few sentences here and there. The headline is "No direct satellite view needed: cellular Starlink phone gets a signal in your pocket." And a quote from the guy Ben Longmire, who I believe is a engineer at Starlink, quote, "I thought the human body would attenuate more signal," according to a SpaceX exec who also teased, quote unquote, light data for cellular Starlink service next year. Light data being defined as texting, basically, and maybe a little bit more expansion from there. And then going on with the information here, Starlink's upcoming cellular Starlink service won't need a clear view of the sky to receive signal. So that's why you don't need the traditional dish apparatus. That the phone alone, direct to the satellite, will give you usability. The satellites can communicate with the phone even when it's in your pocket, according to Ben Longmire, SpaceX Senior Director for Satellite Engineering. He's done testing, it says. He says he usually does his testing in his house at his dinner table, and he says it's near a window. And SpaceX DTC, Direct to Cell, also works in a pocket. Okay, we said that. And then there's like three more points that I want to share that are in here. The statement offers a glimpse of the potential capabilities of Starlink satellites, which will first support text messages before powering voice calls and internet downloads. SpaceX developing its technology to help mobile carriers provide coverage in cellular dead zones, which are often located in remote areas, like we were talking about the other night.
Right.
Companies still waiting for
so this is a continuation of what we talked about last week, and you're basically just saying that this technology is further along than I had suggested?
Yeah, and I think it's cool.
It is cool. I don't know what utility there really is, and being able to text from anywhere, even with no cell towers nearby, that's certainly an improvement. And yeah, I will readily concede that that's further along than I would have expected. But I don't know.
Yeah, for those of us who are trying to make big money on the internet and don't want to be and want to reside in those dead areas, it means that we don't have to pay the higher price tag or the high price tag currently for an additional Starlink satellite hookup, that we can get it through our phone at conceivably not quite as much money per month.
Well, we don't know yet how much this is going to cost. And texting doesn't use up very much data, not very much at all.
Right, but they're saying here. Let me give you the next little thing here that I was gonna that talks about that. First of all, they say that they're looking at they've already demonstrated download rates at 17 megabytes a second. And then they say it'll take a while for SpaceX to roll out the capability to users. They can do it, but to get it to all users, it'll take a while. And then they give a time frame here. Longmire noted that cellular Starlink will first support, quote unquote, near continuous light data, meaning texting, in 2025 for mobile phones before offering continuous broadband and voice support, quote, later on, however many years after 2025 later on means.
Yeah. And that's assuming they figure out how to do it, unfortunately.
Well, I think they've already figured out. It's just a matter. I think it's bandwidth is what there's one more important point that answers that question. Let's see.
But I mean, there's a very big difference between sending and receiving text messages and sending and receiving voice data.
Yeah, number of satellites. That's why he keeps pumping up all those satellites, and he basically needs to about double the tens of thousands that are already up there. And here is an interesting point. However, several telecommunications firms, including AT&T and Verizon, who are noted to be the competitors to T-Mobile, whom Musk said T-Mobile would have exclusive use of the service from Starlink for the first 12 months, the first year, before he allows contracts with AT&T and Verizon. So it's AT&T and Verizon in court, well, not in court, they're lobbying the FCC to deny the waiver over concerns, fake concerns, I believe. The cellular Starlink satellites will generate radio interference with their own networks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, and that's neat. This technology still doesn't exist yet, and, I'm not opposed to the technology existing that allows people to actually use the internet in an actually usable way out there in the woods or in the mountains of New Hampshire. I don't think it's going to be economically viable, but I could be wrong.
Well, the only question is, so, I mean, I can, if this doesn't come along, then that just means I'm buying the Starlink Mini. And that's, several $100, $150 a month. Well, so if Starlink Mini, what?
Yeah, I was just to say, it's probably going to be more economically viable given that they're already selling internet access from it, which I don't know that they were really doing that with the satellites in the past so much.
What do you mean they're already selling internet access with it?
High speed internet. So something that there was high demand for, as opposed to, in the past when you had low speed satellite internet access. There wasn't going to be as much demand for that, but by comparison.
And, this guy is using it in his home, which is very different from using it in the mountains of New Hampshire.
Yeah. What it means to me, though, is if they can make this work, all I need to be able to do is interact with a website. And if I can interact with a website using a cell phone, smartphone only through Starlink, paying whatever the upcharge is, even if it's the same price as the full-blown Starlink, then I don't have to deal with buying, which is not a big deal, but setting up the Starlink equipment and moving it around and whatever, because I can have it in my pocket.
Yeah, that's cool. I hope it works out, David. Thank you for the call tonight and for the information. It's certainly promising technology, and I like the idea of it's not decentralizing the internet, but it kind of is, because it's giving you more access points without being limited to one geographic location. And I would like to see more companies other than Starlink doing this sort of thing so that you did have more decentralization where you could go with this company or that company to provide you with this internet.
A competitor to Starlink.
There may be. But Starlink is certainly the big one right now.
I don't know if the competition has gotten off the ground, though.
Yeah. Well, maybe in time, because I would certainly like to see that. The internet right now, it's frustrating. It's in a state of just completely unused for me. I don't know how the average person is using their mobile phones for browsing the internet at all. I've tried this using the Google Chrome browser, and it's completely unusable. I have screenshots that I've taken where a tiny portion of the page I'm looking at is the actual content that I'm looking for, and there's just ads everywhere. It's completely unusable, and it all goes away once I take that same link and copy and paste it to the Brave browser. And on that note, I bought a Raspberry Pi recently because I'm so sick of advertisements. So I've decided I'm going to stop it at the network level. So I bought a Raspberry Pi, and this is a project that I wanted to do it tonight, but I had to do the show instead, so I'm going to do it tomorrow night. I'm going to set it up. I've got a guide on it because I've never really messed with a Raspberry Pi, and I don't know anything about them really, except that they're tiny little computers, right? But there's apparently, it's basically going to sinkhole all of the DNS requests for advertisements, and it's going to do it at a network level. Obviously, I'd have to go into the device and set its DNS server to be the Raspberry Pi, but that's fine. I know how to do all of that. I want something, though, that actually operates at the router level. Like, I want people to connect to my Wi-Fi network and then go, oh my God, I'm not getting any ads on here. This is crazy. What's going on? Like, they could do that in theory with the Raspberry Pi, but they'd have to go into their Wi-Fi settings and change their DNS server manually, which is all doable, but I don't want them to have to do that. I want some way of having this at the network level, and I'm sure it exists.
Isn't this just a matter of changing the DNS?
Yes, probably.
Okay.
But not with my ISP. And it's so frustrating. I told them I did not want their router. All I wanted was their modem. I had a customer supply router I want to use. But no, just like I ran into with Spectrum a few years ago, you cannot do that. You have to use their router. And it may be possible with Fidium that I'm able to remove it from the equation. I haven't looked into that yet because I've been a little bit busy, but that is on the agenda.
I will have to say I haven't played around too much with modems, in recent years, but usually you can put them into bridge mode of some kind, which means your router gets a public IP address and then you can just ignore the modem.
You can with some of them. Spectrum wouldn't do some of that. And I had to get a business account with Spectrum in order to...
Wait, what?
Yeah, it became really messy. And the business account was costing me like $260 a month or something like that. That was so that I could have a static IP address.
You shouldn't need a static IP address
No,
to do that.
I needed a static IP address for other reasons.
Okay, yes,
But
that would cause you to need a business account.
But
yeah.
some of the other features that I needed were also not... And some of those were basic things like that, like being able to just have the router use the public IP address and have the modem basically just being a pass-through, basically. Yep. Yeah, that wasn't available to residential. At least that's what they told me, but Spectrum likes lying, and apparently Fidium seems to like lying as well.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical
because
of that.
Fidium gave me the option. They said, do you want one of our routers? And I said, no, absolutely not. I've got like 12. Why would I want one of yours? And plus, all of my devices are already set up to use my router. All I have to do is throw this router in, change it to use your gateway, and I'm good to go.
Yep.
But no, they threw theirs in anyway. And the only way to administrate it is to log into a freaking web panel online over the internet and manage it that way. And I cannot stress how much I hate that. Why can't I open a browser and type in its local IP address and make changes to it that way? That's the way that it's always been done. That's the way it should be done.
That's all the more reason why you should have your own router in between.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a security issue. You should not be able to remotely connect to the modem that you can be guaranteed isn't getting security updates.
And that's the only way.
Because that then gives them access to the rest of your network. So every time you hit a print on a print job, you send click the print button and it sends a print job to your printer. Well, and that's on your network. Well, now whoever has control over your modem can now, see all of that. Because none of those are encrypted. Not to mention, whatever else, you might be doing on your network.
It's also just terrible, sloppy design to take this thing that can exist in-house, in my house, and move it out there somewhere to where I have to use their web panel to log in and administrate my network. That's so bad fundamentally from a security standpoint.
It's definitely, it's one thing to, once something hits the router hits your modem, you can't, you need to have it encrypted, but within your own network, you should definitely be in control of that. And you don't have that if you take an ISP supplied router.
No, so I did buy a Raspberry Pi, and I bought one of the kits. I'm not proud of it, but that seemed the way to go because it has a little container for it and all of the stuff that I'm going to need in order to make it happen, including a compatible micro SD card.
I'm actually not entirely sure what you're doing with this because it sounds like
I'm basically just setting up a Raspberry Pi, installing a particular piece of software on it, and turning it into a DNS sinkhole.
Okay.
It's just going to basically be a DNS server that passes almost all requests to the router.
But you're excluding some requests.
Yeah, but some of them it will just kill. And presumably that will allow me to no longer see ads on YouTube, on my television.
So DNS proxy probably is what you're doing. And then you have a list of IPs that you are dropping.
Yeah.
Or domains, I guess.
I assume that's included in the software that I will be installing, the ad blocking software that gets installed onto the Raspberry Pi. It should be fun. It's a fun little project. And, the whole Raspberry Pi thing, it cost me like $30. So I'm probably also going to throw some video game emulators on there for like old school video games because why not? They don't require many resources, and probably use it for a little dedicated emulation box because Raspberry Pis are cool. They're neat. They're fun to play with, and if you break it, it doesn't really matter because it was only like $25 or $30. even the full kit with all of the little case for it and everything was like $45. So definitely worth it to invest in and play around with and just find out a little bit more about Raspberry Pi and Linux. And death to ads on the internet. I hate them so much. And you're about to be served ads. I can't control that. Thanks for listening.
My name is Angel Rach. I'm a mother of 2 teenage children, and I fought all the way to the Supreme Court for the right to use the medicine that saved my life. I've been permanently disabled for 10 years, with an inoperable brain tumor, wasting syndrome, and several other serious conditions. For 4 years, I was in a wheelchair, in so much pain, I couldn't even hug my kids. The hardest part was looking in their eyes and seeing how much they were suffering because of my medical condition. The medicine that gave me my life back and gave my kids their mom back